by your age, I know that which you may have participated in. I know for a fact, without having to ask him, that my whip, Senator Boni Halwale, does not know what KCP at class 8 is, Mr. Speaker. But you can hear those that sat for the Cambridge exam are part and parcel of this House. The point is this, Mr. Speaker. Over the years, Kenya as a country has continued to improve on its education system, and we must never, Mr. Speaker, lose sight of the fact that the more we fine-tune it and make it better, we produce professionals, Mr. Speaker, that are able to take on the task of leadership in any corner of the world, and they shine, Mr. Speaker, and become better at whatever they are doing. Therefore, I appreciate the fact that this formed the very first thematic area that the President chose to address, Mr. Speaker, because there have been concerns about the CBC, competence-based curriculum, Mr. Speaker, rolled out in 2017, but continues to find struggle. And 7 years down the line, Mr. Speaker, has never really settled in the minds of ordinary parents. In fact, I remember, Mr. Speaker, that during the campaigns in 2022, this topic featured prominently. And many parents were actually concerned, Mr. Speaker, that we were rolling out a curriculum for which we were ill-prepared, Mr. Speaker, especially in the public sector, and for which, Mr. Speaker, parents actually didn't understand. But there is something also that needs to be mentioned, that many of the time, despite their genuine concerns about CBC and what needs to be done about it, but also I know, Mr. Speaker, that there are parents who have issues with CBC on the very basis the fact that it is so involving that so long as your child is a CBC student, Mr. Speaker, you cannot afford as a parent to take your eye off the education program, because many a times they come back home with assignments which as students they cannot tackle on their own without the help of the parent. And that is a big issue to many of our parents, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it begs the question whether this curriculum is working for and against, or against the citizens of our republic. Mr. Speaker, important questions have also been raised in this particular speech about the standards of democracy, human rights and fundamental freedoms, as well as the rule of law and transparency, for which later on in the speech, Mr. Speaker, the President took time to expound and lay distinction. In fact, to me, if you ask me, Mr. Speaker, if there is a topic that was so elaborately covered and a distinction drawn and a way forward proposed is on this issue of the status of human rights, Mr. Speaker. The whole conversation about fundamental rights and freedoms, Mr. Speaker, that many feel are under threats, and the things that need to be done about it, Mr. Speaker, the President dedicated significant time in addressing that particular topic, if you read through our speech. And you must appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the distinction that was drawn, that many a times the people, for example, I like the fact that, and this House, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately passed a motion which up to now we are yet to see the benefit of, because we asked our committees, including the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, to guide the country on how we can exercise the rights of Article 37. That continues to feature in the President's speech, and the President is not a lawmaker. It is our duty, because many times protests have ended up causing loss of life, Mr. Speaker, and property, and so many other disruptions, Mr. Speaker, because of the very fact that as a country, and as a legislature specifically, because this is our responsibility, Mr. Speaker, we haven't been able to provide a roadmap to the country for how the country can enjoy these rights and freedoms without the normal debates that we normally have, Mr. Speaker, of how is it that I can enjoy my rights without necessarily disrupting the lives of other citizens who may not share or partake in the issues that are of concern to me, Mr. Speaker. I like the fact that he pointed out that many times during times of protest, Mr. Speaker, this issue of infiltration, Mr. Speaker, where you find certain either gangs mobilized by people who have ulterior motives, Mr. Speaker, end up being used to undermine the very reason for which citizens may want to protest. The whole topic of how police have handled this particular matter, Mr. Speaker, the assurance that has been given that the IPOA continues to carry out this investigation. The only question that we must ask, Mr. Speaker, is how much more time do they need before we can eventually get a report, Mr. Speaker? Because even in the very motion of the Senate that we passed here in the month of June, Mr. Speaker, we had proposed specific things that need to be done in this country, including a review of the standing orders of the police on how to guide citizens in terms of protests, Mr. Speaker. I'd move on to an extremely important topic, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of debt. Debt continues to be an extremely difficult subject for any administration, Mr. Speaker. Remember what is our debt exposure to debt and the kind of debates that we've had on the floor of this House on what we need to do. And I appreciate the fact that members of the Budget and Finance Committee continues to remind us each year when we do the budget policy statement, Mr. Speaker, of the need to reduce on our fiscal deficit, Mr. Speaker, because unless we learn to live within our means, Mr. Speaker, we shall continue to be a country that is riddled in debt and our economy will never stabilize, Mr. Speaker. But we must, Mr. Speaker, appreciate and learn to be factual about the challenges that we continue to face, especially in the debt space, Mr. Speaker. I expect in the legislation that we passed here in 2023, Mr. Speaker, we demanded of the Treasury as Parliament that each year, Mr. Speaker, we are furnished actually with a report of our debt exposure and how much has been repaid, Mr. Speaker, and how much more debt have we incurred over the years. Mr. Speaker, I want to believe that if that report had been properly filed, you will not have sometimes senators speaking ignorantly. I saw a senator over the weekend, I think it was Senator Onyonka, saying that the debt accumulated the last 2 years is over 7 trillion shillings. That's not accurate, Mr. Speaker. And you know, I sympathize with him because he was speaking on the topic of integrity and the need to be truthful while lying at the same time. Mr. Speaker, if such reports had been provided to the House, senators will not have spoken out of turn like that. And therefore, I challenge colleagues who sit in Budget and Finance Committee, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that the reporting mechanisms that we provide in the laws that we pass, Mr. Speaker, are actually adhered to. Many of these reports that I table in this House, each afternoon, before even getting to notices of motion, Mr. Speaker, I table various reports from various state departments. And I expect, Mr. Speaker, that senators will take time to read and react to those particular issues. Mr. Speaker, it was calm and reassuring to appreciate the fact that we know that we are not yet out of the woods, Mr. Speaker, but we are suddenly not at the place where we were 2 years ago. Repayment of some of the very critical debt that was pressing hard against us, Mr. Speaker, has helped us to stabilize on inflation, Mr. Speaker, and has been boosted, Mr. Speaker, by the very presence of a strong federal reserves, Mr. Speaker, that we presently enjoy. I think the figure that stated actually that the figure has surged foreign exchange reserve, sorry, not federal reserve, foreign exchange reserve, Mr. Speaker, from $2.4 billion to 9.4, the highest in quite a number of years, and that has helped us, Mr. Speaker. Of course, these numbers and figures, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, do not mean much to the ordinary citizen until the day and time that we are able actually to translate the good figures on Harambee Avenue and here in Parliament into figures in the pockets of ordinary citizens. And that is a journey that Kenya must travel, Mr. Speaker. It's not easy because much as these figures are factual, they are there, that we can confirm that inflation has dropped from 9.6 to 2.7%, Mr. Speaker. The true hallmark and the proper measure of all this will be the day an ordinary citizen breathes a sigh of relief, Mr. Speaker, and say, I can feel that the burden is now lighter, Mr. Speaker, which unfortunately, even as the President concedes in his speech, he knows that that is not the case, much as he's doing something about it. Mr. Speaker, there are many topics that I can speak to, but I have mentioned, and I want to be a good example, Mr. Speaker, that in fact, after the seconding of this motion, Mr. Speaker, by the whip of the majority, Mr. Speaker, I see Senator Eddie will want to do this, but there will be time in future for you, Senator Eddie. I promise you, next year you will do it. In fact, I will allow you to move the motion next year, Senator Eddie. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to speak on the topic of agriculture, because I am a representative of farmers. And I must appreciate, Mr. Speaker, what has been done in this particular space. The President pointed out something which any of us that come, especially from the western side of the country, the rise of the sugar subsector once again. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, that in the last 7 years, there has been an investigation after investigation of importation of sugar, sometimes even eating the country being forced to partake of sugar that is substandard, Mr. Speaker, because people who are being granted importation licenses and they were fetching for sugar from across the world, Mr. Speaker, some of which is not even fit for human consumption. But for the very first time, Mr. Speaker, we have enabled our farmers to be able to keep our factories busy and be self-sufficient in terms of demand for us as a country, Mr. Speaker. And for a long, long time, I haven't seen people fight for those permits to do importation. That's very good progress, Mr. Speaker. And I must appreciate and urge that more be done even in this sector. It is actually possible for us to have a surplus and feed the other COMESA countries, Mr. Speaker, so that our farmers, Mr. Speaker, in the sugarcane growing areas, through this promise of working to ensure that we provide the needed input to put more than 500,000 acres of land into active use, Mr. Speaker. Actually, 500,000 is what has already been brought, but there is need to do more, Mr. Speaker, so that we can sustain that particular sector. The report on the progress in the coffee subsector reported in that particular part of the speech. We have more than 48,000 metric tons increase than what was reported in the previous year, making an earning of an extra 25 billion Kenya shillings to the citizens. The same is reported of what is happening in the dairy subsector. Mr. Speaker, there is more. The last topic actually that I'd wish to speak to is on this issue of the universal health coverage, Mr. Speaker. Under this program known as the Taifa Care, where citizens are now eligible for all services upon registration. And I like what the Ministry of Health is presently doing, where each week they release a county by county statistic of how many people have registered under Taifa Care. I think they do it every Tuesday or Wednesday. I saw for my county last week that they were actually at 19%. I urge senators to take in interest in your counties, because I saw there are counties that are still as low as 4 or 5%. And I believe it is the burden of you as a leader, because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, what is without contestation? You can argue about so many other things, this should have been done better or the other, but the testimonials that I have seen, Mr. Speaker, is that for those that have registered, Mr. Speaker, and be brought into this program, each time they have had an admission in hospital, Mr. Speaker, their bills have actually been sorted. And that is extremely important, Mr. Speaker, because you know for a fact that many ordinary families are just one illness away from poverty. And if you don't have a sufficient government program, Mr. Speaker, that covers people, especially during their times of illness, Mr. Speaker, we can render so many families destitute. And I want to challenge senators that speak to your people, Mr. Speaker, so that you appreciate and grow the numbers. It will be my greatest honor the day I push Kericho County to get to 80–90% of my citizens under Taifa Care, Mr. Speaker, so that I know for a fact that the issues of being invited anymore to fundraisers because citizens have gotten ill becomes a thing of the past, Mr. Speaker. That is the very essence of what UHC is about, Mr. Speaker. And I want to challenge many of us to take keen interest, especially our colleagues that serve in the health committee, so that you provide the necessary oversight on this particular program, ensure that the dream that we have of ensuring that we have a world-class healthcare system. Remember, Mr. Speaker, that we actually provided in the bills that we passed in Turkana for Facilities Improvement Fund, Mr. Speaker, meaning that the funds that are being collected in our hospitals from level 2 all the way to level 6, Mr. Speaker, are being utilized for the improvement and the welfare of that particular hospital. And it's not tenable anymore, Mr. Speaker, like used to be the case, where counties or even national government will collect funds and put them to other use to the detriment of that particular health facilities. It is important that we guide our people, Mr. Speaker, because remember, we provided actually for hospital administration committees at low as level 2, that dispensary that is outside your home, Mr. Speaker, that we provided it for in law, under the FIF law, Mr. Speaker, for there to be committees that supervise the implementation of that particular program in that small dispensary. If we are not careful and we don't pay keen attention to it, Mr. Speaker, then you will find that Kenyans will do sometimes that which you are very good at, only that many times we just ask, we love accusing the political class of the same without necessarily taking time to ponder and reflect on it, Mr. Speaker, is a fact that those monies can easily be lost if we don't put a keen eye, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that those charged with that particular responsibility respect and live up to it. There is a promise which the President made, and I have seen in social media circle today, somebody made a posting about the same, that they are actually a hospital owner. At the time of speaking to us, Mr. Speaker, the President says that SHA will actually pay all the October claims in full. I saw a posting today, and so many hospitals listed alongside it, having received payments, Mr. Speaker, and I need to verify because unfortunately we live in the days of social media, and there are skeptics all around us. There are those that will believe, there are those like Sifuna, you will have to show the actual payment statement, Mr. Speaker, for them to believe. But here is the point, Mr. Speaker, that who knew that there'd live to be a time where a public healthcare program, the card that you carry, would actually be more attractive to hospitals than the card of private insurance claim, Mr. Speaker, because I don't think even the private care that many of those that are well-to-do in society carry settle their claims that quickly. I must appreciate and record that, especially once it's confirmed that that is the case, that the hospitals that provided services for citizens in October have since been paid. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, there are many things. I have only gotten to paragraph 34, but I have said I have to be a good example so that we are able to conclude. For those that came late into the House, we actually explained earlier of the need to cover this between today, tomorrow morning, and tomorrow afternoon, Mr. Speaker, so that we can carry on with other very critical business that we have to consider before the rise of the House next week on Thursday. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, while there are many other things that I have said, I'd wish to put a stop at that on the many programs and the things that have been exposed in the speech, and allow the rest perhaps to be spoken to by the rest of the members who will take time to speak to this particular speech, Mr. Speaker, so that you're able to conclude in the time. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and request the majority whip, the Senator for Kakamega, Senator Dr. Boni Halwale, to second. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Boni Halwale, just one moment, please. I have a communication from the chair. Honorable Senators, in the public gallery, we have 7 persons from Migori County. They're here on a one-day tour on the invitation of the Senator for Migori County, Senator Eddie Okech, MP. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. Honorable Senators, I would also like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon of a visiting delegation from Strathmore University, Next Gen leaders, fellowship participants. The delegation consists of 8 faculty members and 20 fellows who are undertaking a learning visit to the Senate. Honorable Senators, on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome to the delegation and wish them all the best during their visit. I thank you. Senator Eddie Oketch, if you could please welcome the visiting delegation from Migori, and I will allow Senator Edwin Sifuna to welcome the delegation from Strathmore University.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to extend my warm welcome to the team from Migori. Just for avoidance of doubt, Mr. Speaker, in that gallery from Migori are amazing small-scale entrepreneurs from Migori, starting with Eunice Achieng, who is actually a charcoal seller in Migori, and the lady who is leading charcoal sellers in Migori. We have got Mama Dorka Atieno, who also leads the group of women in the market. We have got Jack Ogola, who is also the chairperson of Boda Boda in Migori County. We have got Steve Okwanyo, who is the leader for Boda Boda in Suna West. We have got Joel Obala, who leads a group of people called the tipper drivers, or the lorry drivers in the town, Mr. Speaker. And then we've got Mama Dorothy Achieng, who is also part of the Boda Boda circle in Migori County, Madam Speaker. And then lastly, we have got my manager, Mr. Henry Otieno. And Mr. Speaker, this wonderful group of people, I think that they are the most critical people because they are my employer, first of all. And I appreciate the fact that they employed me to come to this house. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, they have been struggling with what the majority leader talked about, prices of commodities in their grassroots communities for the services and the goods that they provide. And one of the things that they're doing in Migori is that they are forming different circles that can be able to help them negotiate prices of the services that they offer, as well as the goods that they acquire from different stakeholders. So they're here in a number of tours to be able to visit different stakeholders. And it's a very humbling moment to have them in this house because they made me who I am, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, maybe you might not know, but I was once a Boda Boda rider, and the person who taught me to actually ride a Boda Boda, and I have got a mark on my leg when I was burned by the exhaust of the Boda Boda, is that gentleman called Joel Obala. So I owe a lot to them for making me who I am today, and I hope that they'll enjoy learning from the Senate, as well from the larger Nairobi, which I think that Senator Sifuna will also get a chance to say a word with them when we get out there to just get to know Nairobi. Welcome and enjoy the debates in the Senate.
Senator Sifuna.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to join the Senator from Migori in welcoming both the delegation from Migori and the team from Strathmore University here in Nairobi. Honorable Speaker, when Senator Eddie was speaking, I was wondering whether the chair of the Boda Boda is the one who is a bad teacher or whether the senator is a bad student. Because by the time somebody you are educating suffers such an injury, there should be a problem somewhere. But it is the best day for them to be in the Senate, both teams, because there's going to be proper debate happening here today. And you are the people who are on the ground. As we say, ground ni tofauti. I don't know if you have listened to the things that the majority leader was saying, and whether you agree with him that the state of the nation is as painted by him and the President of the Republic. But we will leave it to your judgment, especially because you who have been introduced as Boda Boda, Mama Mboga and Mama Salon were his closest friends. So you are the ones to tell us how the situation is. Honorable Speaker, I celebrate the team from Strathmore. This is a premier university in the country. We are very proud of the work that you do in terms of molding young people to become the great citizens that we expect to be able to move our country forward. And we continue to wish you the best in the work that you are doing at the university. And also during this period that you are touring Parliament, we hope that you can pick up one or two things that will help you in your respective careers, and whatever dreams and aspirations that you have, may they come true. In Jesus' name. Don't say amen. Thank you, Speaker.
Senator Boni Kalwale, you can go ahead and second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion on the exposition of the President's speech as ably moved by the Senator of Kericho. And Mr. Speaker, I've been in this Parliament long enough to witness Parliament rise to acknowledge a speech to the two houses by President Mwai Kibaki. I also witnessed the same standing ovation when it was given to President Uhuru Kenyatta. And last week, I saw the houses rise and acknowledge a standing ovation for the speech by President William Ruto. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, distinguished senators, none of you lobbied in the two houses last week that at a particular pronouncement, they should stand and give that ovation that they extended to the president. Mr. Speaker, they did this spontaneously on the spur. Mr. Speaker, can you allow the distinguished senator of Mombasa to stop?
Senator Mohamed Faki, what is your point of order?
Because I had the distinguished senator from Kakamega saying repeatedly, standing ovation, standing ovation. I know he's a gynecologist, but it's standing ovation. There's a difference between ovation and ovation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the children of Kenya have now had an opportunity yet again to understand the meaning of a frivolous point of order. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, we were never lobbied. Distinguished members of the National Assembly and this House gave that standing ovation to the President because of the content of the speech. I want us to start from there and reflect individually why we came to Nairobi in this august house. Reflect and remember that once upon a time, Singapore was part of Malaysia. And because of extreme levels of poverty, Singapore was kicked out of Malaysia. And the leaders of Singapore at that time rose to share a vision that poverty could not be the reason why they would be condemned in Malaysia. Today, because of that shared vision, they have grown Asia's most successful economy. I therefore want to appeal to our colleagues. Just like you fought in your primary school, secondary school, A-level school, up to university to succeed, let us work for a vision so that our country can come out of poverty. Mr. Speaker, this requires dedication, commitment, and a desire, Mr. Speaker, to live in the midst of success. Why do we continue celebrating politics that speak to poverty instead of politics that speak to prosperity? Mr. Speaker, it's a shame that we know what to do, but we don't do it. For example, infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, as spoken to by the President, is critical. But because of poor national decision-making, the infrastructure that can spur the economy is not given priority. For example, if we must dual roads in Kenya, the first road to dual is from Mombasa to Nairobi, followed by the road from Nairobi to Malaba border. Why? Because the gateway into our economy is Mombasa, and the exit from our economy to the biggest market to our country, Uganda, is through Malaba border. Why have we not dualed those roads? Instead, we have chosen to dual the road, very important, to Central Province, not because of its economic significance, but it's because of its political significance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we need a paradigm shift whereby we think Kenyan. And I want to call upon leaders from Central Province not to succumb to the pressure from a few, very few misguided leaders who some of us don't even know where they came from, who are busy trying to radicalize on tribal lines a region so critical to this country, so that, Mr. Speaker, they can have an opportunity of saying, having supported him, and now that we are talking about withdrawing the support, the country is failing. That is not the way to think. One of the motions that I'd be most proud of in this country, Mr. Speaker, is the motion that exercised the power of this parliament to remind the president and deputy president that they are not above law. This is the route to go. And I look at young members of parliament from Mount Kenya region, with due respect, shy and keep quiet, that if they take on the so-called, the big man, so-called big man of the region, they jeopardize themselves. It is not true. We've been there in 2007, Mr. Speaker, sir. The country was mobilized against the communities of Mount Kenya. And Soita Shtanda and I, we refused. And all members of parliament from the then Western Province and Nyanza Province and Rift Valley Province, if you are not in the Orange Democratic Movement, there's no way you would be elected because of the lie of mobilizing the country against one community. We stood against that, Mr. Speaker, Soita Shtanda and I, and we won the election. Despite that, I therefore want to encourage young members of parliament from Mount Kenya to ignore the threats that are meant to make you fear to embrace nationalism instead of regionalism. Mr. Speaker, having said that, allow me to speak to the agricultural sector in this speech. The President said quite a number of things, but I want to speak to sugar and coffee. Mr. Speaker, for the first time in the history of this country, we have now produced surplus sugar. I am a farmer of sugarcane, and I can assure you the reason was only one thing: subsidized fertilizer. I want to urge the governors from the governor of Kwale, Tana River, Kakamega, Busia, Bungoma, Migori, Kisumu, and Homa Bay to step it a notch higher by supplementing plowing of those farms. If the young president in West Africa was able to buy tractors, I don't see anything stopping our governors from buying tractors so that cultivation, tilling our lands can be affordable to our farmers. Subsidize that, Kenya will be a net exporter of sugar into Comesa and beyond, and believe me, Forex will enter into this country to the extent that our economy will move a notch higher than where we are today. Mr. Speaker, we are now witnessing a situation whereby the sugar cartels that used to frustrate our farmers by importing cheap sugar now have been locked out. We must stand behind the president for this achievement. It was never achieved by President Kenyatta, never by Moi, never by Mwai Kibaki, never by Uhuru, but President William Ruto has achieved it. For a fact, Mr. Speaker, the support that the president is pronouncing himself on the issue of coffee we need to do slightly more. It's unfortunate that because of the pressure of urbanization, the large coffee farmers of Kiambu have put their farms under residential houses. We now must encourage farmers from outside Central to do more coffee farming, because coffee is more productive than farming in sugarcane, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to move on and speak to the issue of health. Colleagues, let us be aware of the advent of social media. Social media is a very serious agent of misinformation. Deliberate. I did not know that they have now become so sophisticated to move from photoshopping of pictures to even photoshopping, I don't know that you can call it photoshopping of videos. They are doing so effectively that a noble thing like the Social Health Authority with the attendant Social Health Insurance Fund is being, Mr. Speaker, blacklisted on social media to the extent that now we have a large percentage of the populace of Kenya that thinks, Mr. Speaker, that SHA and SHIF are the wrong things. I want to assure Kenyans, as a doctor of medicine, that the way to go, whether some people like it or not, is to move from NHIF to Social Health Authority and Social Health Insurance Fund. Why? Because this is a social program. A social program, Mr. Speaker, that was imagined by Charles Njonjo. Charles Njonjo, Attorney General, was indeed great. In 1966, Njonjo was disturbed that the only people enjoying insurance in health were white people and Asians. So Charles Njonjo mooted this idea. And here we are today, whereas Njonjo was responding to a population of 8 million people, we want to be stuck in a social program that was good when the country had a population of 8 million people and refused to embrace SHA and SHIF, Mr. Speaker, that are designed to meet a bigger population of 60 million people that we have in Kenya today. Mr. Speaker, the people misinforming the public are, again, politicians from a certain region, and I'm proud of the locals of that region because they have ignored that misinformation to the extent that it is the counties of Mount Kenya, led by Nyeri, followed by Kirinyaga, who are the highest in this new program. Somebody tell the former deputy president that you can play on social media, but on the ground, the people are the ones who are leading the republic in impressing SHA and SHIF, as it should be. I want to call upon the senator of Turkana, the senator of Wajir, yours truly, not yours truly, Mr. Speaker. I want to call upon the senator of Mandera. I want to call upon the senator of Garissa. Stop talking from Nairobi. Go and tell the people in Turkana, people in Mandera, people in Wajir, people in Garissa, dear Kenyans, to enlist in SHA SHIF. They are the least. You'll have your time to debate. I know you're cleverer than me, so you'll show your intelligence when your time comes.
Whip.
Okay.
Majority Whip. There's a point of order. Senator Enoch Wambua, what is your point of order?
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, you know, I'm listening to Senator Boni Alwale going on a tyrant against senators, his colleagues. And I'm wondering, when did they become part of the president's speech, Mr. Speaker? And you know, Senator Alwale, through you, Mr. Speaker, has been in this house long enough to know that you don't cast aspersions against your own colleagues. And saying that they never go home, they speak from Nairobi. Who has paid him, Mr. Speaker, to spoil the names of very hard-working senators from the northern frontier, Mr. Speaker?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, young Senator Wambua sometimes admires me. And I know on this particular score, he wants me to appreciate the fact that he's a journalist. I tell you, the French say, res ipsa loquitur. Facts speak for themselves. What I'm saying, sorry, that is Latin. In Latin. In Latin, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appeal to Wambua. Think, Senator Wambua, think, my younger brother, why would Nyeri register 20.8%? And today, as we speak, Wajir has registered 1.3%. That is res ipsa loquitur in Latino. Mr. Speaker, you can interrupt me if you want.
Senator Wambua, what is your point of order?
So if Senator Mazayo understands what Senator Alwale is saying, I don't understand. Because, Mr. Speaker, there is something that I've argued in this House for many, many years. Was something called distance to service. And you know, Senator Alwale is using the marginalization of the northern frontier and laying it on the shoulders of sitting senators, as though the senators here were supposed to go to their respective counties and do the actual registration for SHA. Mr. Speaker, Senator Alwale must be told that he should actually give us a record, if that's the path he wants us to take, of how many people he himself has registered in Kakamega County. Because that is not the responsibility of senators to register people for SHA and SHIF. The Speaker, I insist again, maybe this time you will hear me, Senator Alwale through the Speaker, please don't cast aspersions against your own colleagues. Second, the motion, give us a floor. We have important things to say about this motion, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wambua, the world is led by leaders. And the leaders, Mr. Speaker, who lead the world are not doctors, are not lawyers, are not engineers, they are not journalists. The leaders of the world are politicians. And since we are the politicians, we should learn from history. The success that we are borrowing from of NHIF was a stroke of thought by a politician by the name of Charles Njonjo. Njonjo, who sat in this house. I'll sit and insist that we must all fall back to the community and tell people star 147 hash. Mr. Speaker, instead, when you reduce yourself to a heckler, Wambua, then we start wondering whether you went to the University of Kaparajonjo or you went to one of the universities that we know. Mr. Speaker,
Senator,
why?
Senator Aaron, You have an intervention on Boni Kalwale? Okay. Proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why I will not hold any punch. I want to punch educated people of this country. I want to punch people with an income and in employment of this country. I want to punch them in the mouth because they are the ones who are misinforming the public that SHIF is expensive. They want their experience to be related to by the boda and the mamamboga. It's a lie. SHIF is expensive because of the size of your purse. But to the ordinary Kenyan, Mr. Speaker, SHIF is cheaper than NHIF. And if we go this route, we will move insured Kenyans from 10 million people to 50 million people. And the Senator of Kitui, who is truly not happy with my contribution, you are being asked to pay 32,000. And the villagers in Kitui, each will be paying 300 shillings. You should also be grateful that the people who voted for you now will have a chance to have access to health the way your wife and your children and close relatives enjoy. This is the Kenya we are fighting for. What joy would I get from the fact that my daughter, Tina, can get an attack of pneumonia and we save her, and yet her age mate gets an attack of simple upper respiratory tract infection and they die. A common cold, and they die. Yes, but Mr. Speaker, we will insist that educated people, people with high income, people in
give him the mic. I give you 1 minute to conclude and second.
Mr. Speaker, thanks for that minute. There have been so many frivolous points of orders, including somebody I beat in English thoroughly, thinking that he could teach me English. Mr. Speaker, I support strongly.
Senator Aaron Cheriot. Honorable Senators, I propose the question that pursuant to Standing Order 27.6, the Senate, A, records its thanks for the exposition of public policy contained in the address of His Excellency, the President, delivered on Thursday, 21st November 2024, and laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 26 November 2024, and B, notes the following report submitted by His Excellency, the President, in fulfillment of Articles 132(1)(c)(1) and 247 of the Constitution, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 26 November 2024. 1. The 11th Annual Report 2023-2024 on the measures taken and progress achieved in the realization of the national values and principles of governance. And 2. The Annual Report on the state of national security for the period 1st September 2023 to 31st August 2024. Honorable Senators, now I call Senators. Yes, Senator Aaron Cheriot.
111.1, to move that notwithstanding the resolution that we made here in February, on the 14th of February 2024, on the time allocated to each senator to speak to such a motion, that on this particular motion, we limit debate to 10 minutes per senator. Mr. Speaker, I had earlier explained the reasoning of the SPC behind that proposal, and I have mentioned to the leader of minority who was present with us in that meeting, Mr. Speaker, and therefore I want to make that request 10 minutes should be sufficient, Mr. Speaker. Myself, I had 1 hour. I only did 20. A third of the time that I had because of this appreciation. I request Senator Mazayo to second.
Senator Mazayo.
I second.
I propose the question that pursuant to Standing Order 1111, and notwithstanding the resolution of the Senate made on 14th February 2024, debate on this motion be limited to a maximum of 10 minutes for each senator. Seeing the mood of the House, I put the question that pursuant to Standing Order 111.1, and notwithstanding the resolution of the Senate made on 14th February 2024, debate on this motion be limited to a maximum of 10 minutes for each senator. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Eddie Okech.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity and for also according me the courtesy. Mr. Speaker, if you look under Article 132 of the Constitution, sub-article C, under the functions of the President, it says that once every year, the President must give report in address to the nation on all the measures taken and the progress achieved in the realization of the national values referred to under Article 10. And then, Mr. Speaker, publish in the Gazette the details of the measures and progress under subparagraph 1, and lastly, submit a report for debate to the National Assembly on the progress made in fulfilling the international obligations of the Republic. I think, Mr. Speaker, from what I listened to, there was less of the international obligations to the Republic and more of the realization of the national values under Article 10, which, Mr. Speaker, is what I want to reflect to today, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, if you look at line number 6 of the President's speech, it says that, to my understanding, the concerns and issues voiced by millions of Kenyans about the state of the nation deserve meaningful engagement, thorough understanding, and thoughtful response. Mr. Speaker, and prior to that, Mr. Speaker, the President had indicated that the speech that he was giving was actually coming as a national address under a very important backdrop of the events of this year. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is my duty to assess that speech based on those 3 parameters, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying that I put a value judgment to the President's speech by saying that when everything that the President talked about is now presented to us in the House and we listen to them in the joint session, Mr. Speaker, I think I am still judging that, given the conclusion of the President and that report, there is a serious public deficit with regards to trust in this government. And that's the challenge that I want to give the President a feedback to go and deal with in everything that he talked about, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, the reason I'm saying this is because there are a number of items that the President referred to, and the standing ovations that we experienced were only 2. The first standing ovation was in the issue of Adani. And the second standing ovation was when the President talked about femicide in general and women issues in particular. That was my experience listening to the President, Mr. Speaker. So it would be in order, Mr. Speaker, to start with my comments on those 2. And, Mr. Speaker, the Adani issue has been a thorn in the flesh of Kenyans to the extent that, Mr. Speaker, there has been voice after voice of people talking about Adani issues. And, Mr. Speaker, I remember my own party leader talking about Adani in the context of what we call PPP, the principle of PPP. And today, because I'm here, Mr. Speaker, I can as well clear the hair, in the sense that as a country, we are spending money predominantly on two areas. One is on running government, administrative spending, and number two, on development. Now, Mr. Speaker, as a country, we find ourselves in a place where development is hitting a record low because there is no finances. That money for financing must come from somewhere. And Mr. Speaker, there are only three ways that we can be able to raise money for funding development projects. Number one is from taxing, Mr. Speaker. But taxes are already overburdening our people that we cannot tax anymore. And number two, Mr. Speaker, is by borrowing. The records of borrowing that even the President talked about, Mr. Speaker, are really bad, to the extent that even domestic borrowing is still at 55%, crowding out businesses in this economy, Mr. Speaker. Then what remains is PPP, public-private partnerships that we can be able to raise money from. But the problem that was there with Adani, which I wanted to invite the President to see, that the standing ovations are not enough, is that there was no proper transparency in those transactions. And Mr. Speaker, even after this cancellation by the President, still there are doubts with regards to the details of contracts that were in this Adani deal. Was there some money that was spent by the government in terms of due diligence that Adani was having? For instance, Mr. Speaker, if you're going to do a power investment of 98 billion, Mr. Speaker, you can be sure that diligence will be needed. There will be some lawyers involved. There will be engineers involved. There will be surveys to be done. There will be appraisals to be done. Were these things done in the contract in a way that is transparent, and can it be for once and for all, Mr. Speaker, that the government can be transparent to the country on this issue of Adani, so that the public trust that the government of the day continues to lose in the people can be corrected for once and for all? Mr. Speaker, that also goes with the same issue of femicide. Mr. Speaker, the number of issues that are largely the issues of human rights violations that we have seen in the country, I think that we were talking with the majority leader today, and one of them that was bothering our head was the fact that Besigye, the opposition leader of Uganda, was arrested within our borders and actually traveled on the road all the way to Malaba border. And you could ask ourselves, which country are we where somebody like Besigye can be arrested that way? These are continued incidences of violation of human rights that, when not responded to with the money that they need by the government, what happens is Article 73 of the Constitution gets eroded. That public trust that is given to the President and as well as us elected leaders, and our responsibility that needs to be done according to public trust, gets eroded. And this is the biggest problem that this administration must deal with, Mr. Speaker. I'm trying to rush because I only have about 4 or 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker. I think I was impressed by the idea that the President tried to talk about the impact on the prices of farming, given the subsidies that were put in place, Mr. Speaker. But I have a problem by the fact that we don't see the corresponding change in prices that can be able to help farmers. For instance, Mr. Speaker, if you go to Eldoret today, and Laja was in Gishu, farmers have harvested their maize, they have got bumper harvest, but the price for those commodities are not commensurate with what they want to see in their farm input, Mr. Speaker. So while I agree that there has been a bumper harvest in a number of places, there is still no proper correspondence of that bumper harvest with regards to price stabilities on both imported and exported goods in the economy, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we also see it reflecting on what I would call the CBR. Mr. Speaker, the central bank rate was actually reviewed in October to 12. But if you look at how the banks are lending, it's not corresponding to this, and therefore it shows that the monetary policy of this country, Mr. Speaker, hasn't responded to what the President is talking about, stability of our finances in the country, as well as stability in the prices, Mr. Speaker. So there's a lot to desire from that, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to talk very strongly about other form of farming that I don't think that the President, in his speech, was able to give an indication of what will be the proper response in terms of policy going forward, Mr. Speaker. you saw that the president talked about the impact we have had in sugarcane, impact we have had in maize, and impact we have had in rice industries. But Mr. Speaker, what happens to somebody like Senator Seki, who comes from a pastoralist community where the livestock there are not subsidized, Mr. Speaker? There is no proper investment in subsidies on livestock in Narok, in Kajiado, and other pastoralist communities, and they are also part of production units in the economy. What happens to somebody like Senator Kajuang? I saw him here, I think maybe it's in the lounge, who comes from a place where people are actually rearing fish in cages, in ponds, and they are also, having to go and fish deep in the lake, Mr. Speaker. What happens to those production units that are not necessarily tillage of land? I think that, Mr. Speaker, there needs to be investment in terms of subsidy that goes to those different modes of production as well, to supplement and as well as complement the issue of bumper harvest that we are seeing. You cannot empower one area and leave other areas of production, Mr. Speaker. So on average, it was a good speech, but I think that there are still gaps that leave a lot to desire in the area of transparency between government and the people. And most importantly, the government of the day must work hard to communicate to the people through ministerial departments and agencies that can be able to restore public confidence, public trust, and public faith in the institutions of governance. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Karen Nyamu.
Is it on? Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to discuss or give the pointers on the President's speech that he delivered in the joint House sittings, Mr. Speaker. The President noted that the government has learned through the hard way to listen to its citizens on the issues they're raising from time to time, and that he acknowledged the mistake that we had done, for example, when we attempted to pass the Finance Bill 2024, we did not carry the whole country with us. We did not take time to communicate and to let them know the very good and very gainful steps that we were going to achieve and make through that bill, Mr. Speaker. And so the President noted that we need to, and that was the mood of his speech, that he wanted the whole country to know the steps that we are making. Mr. Speaker, the step that we are making in the health sector is revolutionary. And for the first time, I had the President refer to it as Taifa Care. And I was seated next to Senator for Nakuru, Senator Tabitha Keroche, and I was telling her, if it was a selfish leader, they would have called this insurance Ruto Care, because the changes that are going to be effected by these laws that we passed in this very house are revolutionary, and they are going to be a game changer. They are actually a game changer when finally implemented. Mr. Speaker, we as politicians are called upon from time to time to help our people whenever they have a family member going through health issues, and it was very expensive to treat our people in the past. I remember when we were campaigning, when we were going to the people, giving them the promises of what we were going to do, the President time and again made reference to this social health insurance fund and how it was going to work, that it was pegged on what you're earning. Today, we are charged 2.75% of your gross income. Personally, I was charged in October. I paid 32,000, up from the 700 that I was paying before. I'm sure those who earn less, the bottom deduction is 300 shillings down from 500 shillings, Mr. Speaker. And that means that when all Kenyans are covered comprehensively, we will have less harambes to attend to. We cannot complain about the 32,000 shillings that we are getting deducted, because that is just a drop in the ocean compared to what we give every day through M-Pesa, through physical harambes, and assisting other people sort their health issues. I don't know if Kenyans know that previously you could find somebody stabbed by the roadside and you could not dare take that person to hospital because you would have to cover their costs. Under the Social Health Insurance Fund, you can freely take that person to hospital for emergency care because they are covered. The chronic illnesses are also covered. We are now going to improve our facilities so that we do not have to travel out of the country to get this vital treatment and to do harambes, Mr. Speaker. And for me, if this government doesn't do anything else, if we fully implement the SHA and the SHIF, we will have done enough for our people. We will have done God's work. Because to me, as a leader, that is what we are called to do. Mr. Speaker, the President also took his time to reassure Kenyans that the housing project, apart from employing many youth, that it's going to have houses available to its citizens in an equitable manner. That there will be no favoritism, and he encouraged as many people, as many Kenyans as possible to apply for these houses in an open platform where it's not a physical kind of application, so there is no favoritism. It is a fair platform, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the President also noted the steps we have made. We having young Kenyans get gainful employment and meaningful employment abroad. Previously, we used to export labor. We used to export a lot of unskilled labor in the Arab countries mainly. But because of the involvement of the government, we're having bilateral negotiations, and we are onboarding new countries that we have never had relations before, like Jordan and others, Mr. Speaker. And Kenyans should take advantage of this to get skilled jobs, to export skilled jobs out of the country, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad that the President talked about the abductions. It has been a cry in the country, and he clarified that mainly what was being called abductions was either normal arrests, and he was very clear that he was not making excuses for illegal arrests, Mr. Speaker. The President also talked about femicide. It has been an issue in this country. At the same time, as a society, we have to be very careful so that this fight against femicide doesn't turn out to be lynching of the boy child. We have to look at it wholesomely. We have to protect our boy child, because I don't think we are raising murderers, but it's a complex issue that needs to be looked at wholesomely, Mr. Speaker. I also noted that the government services have been digitized. 20,800 government services have been digitized by being onboarded on the e-Citizen platform, up from 300 services in 2022, Mr. Speaker. And this has raised revenue very significantly. From the year ending June 2023, where we raised 5.3 billion, to the year ending June 2024, where we raised 7.6 billion, marking a 43% increment, Mr. Speaker. On corruption, the President had a lot to say about corruption, but what I remember is he threw the ball to both houses, and particularly told us to hasten on passing of the conflict of interest bill which is squarely in our hands, Mr. Speaker. And I hope we will be heeding to that call and passing that bill and going through the contentious and getting the contentious clauses done with, so that we can serve Kenya through that law. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sifuna.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, you know my position on the State of the Nation address. I have always held the position that the state of the nation is the state of a people, and that I personally do not trust the current president to paint the true picture of the state of the people. And again this year, Honorable Speaker, because of that doubt in my mind, I chose not to attend the State of the Nation. Honorable Speaker, there is usually a disconnect when you listen to the president from his words, between his words and the actions of his government. And some of us have come to doubt whether really the things that he says he actually believes. Honorable Speaker, let me start by something that would sound like sweet music to the ears of somebody like me who believes in democracy. At paragraph 53 of the president's speech, Honorable Speaker, the president, and I wanted to read this verbatim, said, "We are a democracy, and that democracy is a hard-won, non-negotiable right and guarantees freedom that we are proud of and must always defend. That our national democratic culture expresses itself energetically through robust discourse, boldly speaking truth to power, and holding leadership to account. It is a tradition of fearless expression and vigorous public participation. This is who we are, and there is nothing anyone can do about it." That is where I want to begin. The president could as well have been describing me. We are who we are. We believe in this democracy, we'll fight for it, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The question in my mind is whether the president actually believes in the words that he spoke. Honorable Speaker, if you go to another thing that he said that sounded like music to ears of the people who actually believe in democracy and participation of the people, he said that he had learned through the hard as well as customary ways that listening is a full-time occupation of leadership, and that all questions asked by the people must be answered thoroughly and in full. The question we ask ourselves is whether he actually believes the words that came out of his mouth, that he is a listening president, number one, and that all questions asked by the people have been answered by his administration thoroughly and in full. And I want to make the quickest example here. Over the past year, following the protests that we've seen in this country, there are families still asking questions of this government. They're asking questions about what happened to their loved ones. They're asking questions about people who have been missing for a long time. And even in this particular speech, the president never provided any answers. Honorable Speaker, you go to paragraph 6. He says he desired to respond to the most pressing concerns that have been raised by Kenyans of all walks of life. And he went ahead and framed what, in his opinion, were the most pressing concerns that have been raised by Kenyans. And again, the question becomes, after framing those things and elaborating them very clearly, did he even, in his own speech, respond to the things that he had said were the most pressing concerns of Kenyans from all walks of life? Honorable Speaker, the president asked the question, number one, whether leaders understand the pain and struggles of the people. This is in paragraph 7 of his speech. I do not know whether he answered that question, but for me, and the feedback that I received from the people of Nairobi that I represent, is that we as a leadership, a political leadership, do not understand what Kenyans are going through. And it shows even in the sort of proposals that we put forward in order to solve some of the issues that have been raised by the people. The second question he framed was whether policies in the education sector are working. Honorable Speaker, I also do not know whether he really answered it. But from the feedback of the people that I represent is that education is in a crisis and that no plausible solutions are being proffered by his government. Then he asked the questions whether developments in relation to democracy, human rights, fundamental freedoms, rule of law, and transparency and accountability. This is in paragraph 8. Whether the direction of developments in relation to these issues is positive or negative. Again, Honorable Speaker, I don't know whether he answered it, because in the speech, I personally did not find an answer that is a true reflection of the situation on the ground and some of the issues that Eddie has spoken here to. point to a direction in direct opposite from the direction we should be going when it comes to issues of democracy, human rights, fundamental freedoms, the rule of law, transparency and accountability. He also asked the question whether policy and his administration is only in furtherance of service delivery or just in aid of political strategy. Many people that I speak to, Honorable Speaker, believe that everything this administration does has nothing to do with the lives of Kenyans. They are only looking for the political outcomes, and especially putting the president in a position that he can vie for re-election in 2027. Honorable Speaker, then of course, as I expected, he spent a considerable amount of time looking back to the situation that he inherited when he came into power. And this is again something that even in my previous debate on his speech last year, we said we want to encourage this administration to be forward-looking. Yes, we understand the situation that was obtaining in September of 2022, but you are halfway through your presidency, Mr. President. You cannot still be talking about the war in Ukraine and the strictures of supply chain during or out of the war in Ukraine. We want you now to move forward, because at this particular point in time, you cannot still be talking about 2022 and telling us that you have laid firm foundations that maybe many of us do not see. Honorable Speaker, of course there were issues with some of the figures that were being thrown around in his statement. For instance, he claimed that inflation at the point he took over in September of 2022 was at 9.6%. Massaging of those numbers, whether it is by a small margin or not, is aimed to achieve a certain end, that the perspective is to be painted that he inherited things that were so bad, but that he has brought them back to life. In fact, statistics from the Kenya National Bureau of Standards show that inflation was at 9.1. A difference of 0.5 is not a small difference. Honorable Speaker, he also made a very bold claim that the foreign exchange revenues the foreign exchange reserves have risen to the highest in the last 10 years. That is just not true. If you look at the CBK report, Honorable Speaker, the highest we have had in terms of foreign reserves was 10.01 billion shillings as at 30th of May 2019, which was less than 5 years ago. So it simply is not true that the reserves are at the highest in the last 10 years. Then there is a claim that even the majority leader has tried to repeat here. He made a very clear pronouncement that the Social Health Authority will pay all October claims. In fact, he said by the end of this week or during this week. Honorable Speaker, I heard the majority leader saying he saw a list somewhere indicating that hospitals have been paid. I can confirm here, Honorable Speaker, that that money has not been paid as we talk today. Honorable Speaker, then there was this issue that Senator Khalwale alluded to of a standing ovation. Personally, I was embarrassed for all my colleagues who were present in the House that day, because I believe personally that you are not supposed to expect praise for doing the right thing. You are not supposed to expect praise for doing the right thing. This is something that Kenyans have raised objection over for the past few months. And I want to thank my colleagues in this House, especially Senator Onyonka, who has stayed on business on this question of the PPPs involving Adani. They say that where there is smoke, there is fire. There were always signs, Honorable Speaker, and all these signs were brought to the attention of the public and to the attention of the administration. There was a point at which Adani's accounts in Switzerland were frozen, and we brought it up in committee, the Committee of Transport, when we were discussing the JKIA deal. But nobody was listening to us. As late as hours before the President's address, the Cabinet Secretary for Energy was appearing before the Energy Committee of this House. And he was insistent that even in light of the new information that he had gotten of the indictment in the US of the Adani directors, that the thing would still go on. Honorable Speaker, if there is something that we have learned about the Adani debacle, is that if we stick to the principles in Article 10 of the Constitution, we will never get it wrong. Some people have challenged those of us who are making noise about this particular process because they have not understood the noise we were making. We were saying the Constitution requires that even as possible, and disclose when you receive this interest that these interests have been received. Finally, because I can see the light is on here, Honorable Speaker, the President concluded by saying that the state of it means the ability to endure suffering without breaking or incurring permanent damage. So he knows the or incurring permanent damage. So he knows the truth. He knows the truth that he has stretched Kenyans to the end, but he knows that we will not break because we are like the proverbial donkeys.
Senator, I give you 1 minute to conclude.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker. I was saying that the synonyms that I saw for resilience is a person who has ability to endure suffering without incurring permanent damage or loss. So, Honorable Speaker, he knows that Kenyans are suffering, but that somehow he has discovered that we are resilient, we can take more and more punishment without breaking. And I think this is the only thing in his speech that I agree with. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Cherargei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I want to thank the President for delivering this State of the Nation address. Mr. Speaker, as per Article 132 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the State of the Nation, Mr. Speaker, is like a Chinese dish of sweet and sour. While we celebrate many successes, the country still faces a lot of challenges going into the future, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the President for being listening President. On many occasions, Mr. Speaker, despite the challenges that he took over from September 2022, Mr. Speaker, the President continues to disappoint the naysayers and doomsayers of this nation. Let us look, the nation has many challenges. And in fact, it is miraculous. Mr. Speaker, you know, 2,000 years ago, for us who are Christians, Jesus did miracles. In 2024, William Ruto continues to do miracles going into the future to change the nation to a better country, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, I want to agree that leadership is listening, is engaging, and I'm happy that the President is listening. For us who are farmers, when we complained about food subsidy over production subsidy, he listened and put, Mr. Speaker, many more money to that, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, I want to thank, because I represent 90% or 99% of Nandi County, Mr. Speaker, depend on agricultural economy. For us, Mr. Speaker, the fact that more than 6.5 million farmers were given fertilizer. Mr. Speaker, this season, we have harvested more than 70 million 90 kilos of maize, Mr. Speaker. We want to thank the President that this subsidized fertilizer, when he took over, it was 7,000 shillings. Now it's 2,500, Mr. Speaker. For us who are farmers, know the pain of acquiring farm inputs, Mr. Speaker. The biggest challenge is the issue of fuel. And I'm happy the cost of fuel continues to come down. The issue of farm inputs, pesticides, acaricides that we use in farming is still quite high. And I hope the President will look into it, Mr. Speaker. Even as we talk, I heard my brother talking about that we harvested. I'm happy that the President has directed that National Cereals and Produce Board be open, that we are selling 90 kilos of maize, 3,500, Mr. Speaker. As farmers, we expected between 4,500 to 5,000, Mr. Speaker. But I will be bringing an amendment that just like any other cereals, like dengu, like rice, like beans, Mr. Speaker, we should be selling the 90 kilo of maize, Mr. Speaker, 50 kilo, like any other cereal, Mr. Speaker. And I'll be bringing an amendment that going into the future, we shall not be selling our maize at 90 kilo. We shall be selling at 50 kilo, just like any other cereal, Mr. Speaker. Number two, Mr. Speaker, and I want to agree that we need to do mop-up of the maize that has been harvested in our region, especially in Nandi, in Uasin Gishu, and the rest of the country, Mr. Speaker. My only request to government, Mr. Speaker, and county governments, is to ensure last-mile distribution of fertilizer, so that a farmer who is in Kamalambo, Mr. Speaker, can pick it in Maraba, or somebody who is in Kipiaor, Mr. Speaker, can pick it somewhere nearer, Mr. Speaker, for them to access that going into the future, Mr. Even somebody who is in Chapter Y should be able to pick it within Chapter Y instead of coming all the way to Celia or all the way to Kabiet or Kaiboy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore that is the issue I wanted to touch on, the issue of agriculture, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy the issue of sugar. Sugar, I'm happy Nandi, Mr. Speaker, almost now 90% of Nandi County, we are growing sugar. I was one of the members to serve as the mediation. We agreed, Mr. Speaker, that let us reestablish Kenya Sugar Board. And I'm happy that Sugar Act has been signed into law. One of the problems that we are facing, Mr. Speaker, with the sugar farmers was the issue of maintenance of roads. And I'm happy we did agree that all cess money will go, Mr. Speaker, to the Kenya Sugar Board instead of counties. Because, for example, Nandi County is a bastion of corruption being presided by Governor Sang, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we thought by giving money to counties, like the road that comes all the way from Kabiemit, Chemnoet, Lolgeringet, is impossible coming all the way to Kapchuma, Mr. Speaker, in Masab sub-county. Just similar to other roads within Nandi, even in Chemelil, Chamase, others in Taunet, in Tindret, among many other areas, Mr. Speaker. So this sugar bill will allow, Sugar Act will allow members, and I'm happy the issue of sugar pricing, where we are having issues of tonnage, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy that with this, we will be able to ban imports, Mr. Speaker, because you remember this issue of sugar imports was becoming a dent of corruption, especially through Kenya National Trading Corporation, KNTC, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and the issue of farming continues to be resilient. I hope in the tea sector, Mr. Speaker, we should continue. As in Nandi, Mr. Speaker, we received the lowest bonus. The lowest bonus, 23 shillings, less than 20 shillings, while other regions, which I don't want to name, were receiving up to 60 shillings bonus, Mr. Speaker. We hope going into the future, we must harmonize the issue of tea bonuses so that my farmers in Nandi Hills, in Cheptingting, Mr. Speaker, in Lolduka, Mr. Speaker, in many areas in Nandi Hills, Mr. Speaker, including Kosoiwa, will have opportunity, even in Aldai, Mr. Speaker, will have opportunity of getting standardized. Even in Mosop, I think virtually, the entire of Nandi, Mr. Speaker, is planting. The issue, on the issue of coffee, you have noted, Mr. Speaker, we must ensure, and I remember Senator Wambua and the rest of us who are ranking members will remember the issue of coffee cherry fund, where 10 billion was given out by World Bank, but it went to one region, Mr. Speaker. Yet Bungoma, Nandi, Wazingishu, and many other, including Kericho, in a place called Londiani, in Kipkelian, Mr. Speaker, where we have many farmers are harvesting coffee cherry, Mr. Speaker. We hope with this establishment of coffee cherry fund that the President is proposing will go into the future. On the public debt, Mr. Speaker, I'm aware we have 10.5 trillion Kenya shillings. I'm told every child that is born is supposed to pay more than 201,000, Mr. Speaker, the moment you are born in Kenya, which doesn't look good. I know we have amended that we borrow against our GDP. The issue of public debt, Mr. Speaker, we must, and my request to the President, let us establish the audit of the public debt so that we know who gave us domestic and foreign borrowing, Mr. Speaker, in this country, Mr. Speaker. We need to know this 10.5 trillion, Mr. Speaker, because we are told for every 100 shillings that the government collects, 70 shillings goes to servicing of public debt. Who are these people? And I think, Mr. Speaker, we needed to form a commission of state capture, because this is where state capture originates, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of, because I can see my time is on the issue of CBC, I'm happy and I hope, Mr. Speaker, by January we should have 16,000 classrooms in place, but I got confused. When the CS Julius Migos appeared in the National Assembly, he was talking about 16,000 classrooms. When he was in the village somewhere in Kisii, he was talking about 19,000 classrooms for grade 9 CBC. I hope we can have consistency so that we know how many classrooms will be ready. Mr. Speaker, this CBC was born, Mr. Speaker, during Uhuru Kenyatta era. It is being midwifed by William Ruto, Mr. Speaker, and this CBC, I was talking to junior secondary schools, that 56,000 teachers have been hired under PNP, Mr. Speaker, and pensionable. 20,000 are going to be hired under internship, Mr. Speaker. I want to appeal to TSC. Mr. Speaker, TSC has become a bastion of corruption. Teachers are suffering when they follow their claims, when they want to transfer, Mr. Speaker. It looks like we abolished delocalization on paper, but delocalization still exists, Mr. Speaker. Even teachers who are getting 2-3 years to retire are being posted far instead of posting them near their home so that they can acclimatize into the retirement, Mr. Speaker. So I want to appeal that EACC must look on the operations of TSC and ensure that lethargy and corruption that we see in TSC does not come. Mr. Speaker, as an alumni of Moi University, I'm happy the President noted the going down. The only solution to Moi University, Mr. Speaker, is for any university, Karatina, Masinde Muliro, Maseno, Kitale, Chepkoilel University, is to take their liabilities. It is not about the Vice Chancellor, Mr. Speaker. It is about that Moi University midwife so many satellite campuses, and that is why they are saddled with debts. That is why Karatina and the rest, including others like Chepkoilel, like Maseno, should go and take away their debts. That's how we'll save Moi University. I can assure you Moi University is one of the best universities of this republic, being the foundation of knowledge. Me as an alumni of Moi University School of Law, I'm proud to be so, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, on the university funding model, Mr. Speaker, if you can lend me 1 minute to conclude, is that we must agree, Mr. Speaker, that the university funding model should go in a long way in assisting, Mr. Speaker, in assisting our people. On SHIF and SHA, Nandi has recorded over 115,000. This is a good program, Mr. Speaker, that I ask all Kenyans to register under SHIF and SHA to ensure accessible medical coverage to them. Mr. Speaker, all in a sense, the President is doing his best to ensure, Mr. Speaker, going into the future, that the country looks better. And I want to ask the naysayers and doomsayers that let us give a chance the President, Mr. Speaker, to deliver for this country. And wait for 2027. This is not campaigning moment.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wambua.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to also make a contribution and add my voice to this debate on the State of the Nation address by the President. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by saying that I am happy that the State of the Nation address is not a speech made during Madaraka Day celebrations, where the President has the latitude to speak about everything and anything. It's not a speech, Mr. Speaker, comparable to speeches issued during Mashujaa Day or Jamhuri Day. The State of the Nation address by the President, the Speaker, is a constitutional imperative. It is a constitutional accountability statement by the President, made in the presence of representatives of the sovereigns of this nation, as captured in Chapter 1, Article 1 of the Constitution. The Speaker, it's a constitutional requirement for the President to address the nation on matters of national values and principles, international obligations, and national security issues. It is largely about self-reflection and introspection. It is not, Mr. Speaker, an opportunity for self-praise and congratulation. And that is where, Mr. Speaker, I want to begin my debate on this matter, that I personally take great exception on the representatives of the sovereigns of the Kenyan population who stood to applaud the President for announcing the cancellation of the Adani deals. Mr. Speaker, that announcement may have elicited a lot of praise for the President. It may have elicited a lot of excitement on the part of the members present. But, Mr. Speaker, what that mention of the Adani deals ran short of is to tell the Kenyan people, the sovereigns of this nation, important aspects of that Adani deals. And one of them would have been the President should actually have told Kenyans where the rain started beating us on the matter of the Adani deals. I heard the president saying that the reason for the cancellation of the deals was because he had come across new evidence. I would have expected the president to table that new evidence. Because the speaker, well, from where I sit, because I've not seen that new evidence, from where I sit, there is no new evidence against Adani. The things that are happening to Adani are things that the president has been told about from the day Adani was mentioned. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it shall be remembered that my party leader, His Excellency Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, is today in court, appearing in person, on record, against the Adani deal. And the evidence adduced there is the same evidence that the president is saying he has come across new evidence. The Speaker, the Adani deals were a scheme to pilferage and to con the people of this nation. That's what those deals were about. The Speaker, you know, I marvel at some statements, especially coming from the president, because they also have capacity to embarrass his own government, his own cabinet secretaries. It has been demonstrated by a member of the Energy Committee here, Senator Sifuna, that a few hours before that announcement, the Energy CS was insisting that Adani deal is the best deal that they have clinched as a ministry. Mr. Speaker, this government needs to communicate better, even among itself, so that even as they now come out to speak to the nation, then they are speaking in tandem. Mr. Speaker, I am concerned by the speech of the president that did not address itself to the all-important aspects of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. The Speaker, one of the fundamental tenets of democracy, and we pride ourselves in democracy, is representation of the people. As we speak today, Mr. Speaker, there are sections of Kenyans who are not represented in Parliament and in county assemblies, for the simple reason that we do not have an IEBC in place. Mr. Speaker, I'll give you the president only 2 examples because he occasioned one of those lack of representations. The people of Unguja, where the current CS for energy comes from, are not represented in Parliament. The Speaker, the people of Banisa are not represented in Parliament. Several wards across this country are not represented in the county assemblies. The Speaker, I would have expected the president, in his address to the nation, would give a proper timelines as to when this nation should expect an IEBC fully in office, so that the Speaker, they can carry out the task of elections, and secondly, the delimitation of boundaries, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I heard the president mention about abductions, disappearances, and kidnappings. What the president, the speaker, forgot, or the speechwriter forgot to include in the speech of the president, is the fact that the speaker, at the time the president was addressing the nation on matters security, the parliamentary square had been converted into a police state. I tried with the speaker to access the precincts of Parliament. I could not, because all the streets around Parliament had been cordoned off, and there was heavy presence of unrivaled police officers. And Speaker, I kept wondering, who is afraid of who? Why can't members access Parliament freely and listen and engage with the President without the police officers harassing members and curtailing access? The Speaker, on the matter of public debt, I would have expected the President to give us a lot more information about, when he says that he inherited immense debt from the previous administration. What is immense debt, Mr. Speaker? Why can't we deal with figures? How much money is it that this current administration inherited from the previous administration? What is the current borrowing status of this government? How much money have we borrowed as a country since 2022? How much have we paid? And what is the...
1 minute to conclude, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the outstanding debt? Mr. Speaker, lastly, on the matter of the NHIF, the transition from NHIF to Chief. Mr. Speaker, I want to answer Senator Alwale, and he's not here. But because this will go on record, let Senator Alwale know that the Senator of Kitui County, Enoch Wambua, has no problem whatsoever to contribute 32,000 shillings to the new system. But what the Senator of Kitui has a big problem with, the Speaker, and I will proclaim it, is that I am losing my 32,000 shillings from my salary, and that money is not helping my people in Kitui County. Mr. Speaker, this chief business, to me, as far as I am concerned, and as far as the people of Kitui County who are consuming this service are concerned, it's a sham, Mr. Speaker. We are not benefiting from this thing. This transition was mishandled, Mr. Speaker. Let's face it. We have handled transition of systems, Mr. Speaker. I have personally taken...
Senator,
Speaker.
Senator Cherargei, what is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I stand understanding Standing Order 105 on accuracy of facts. Is it in order for Bishop Senator Wambua or the next governor of Kitui to say that the Shah and Chief is not being enjoyed by the people of Kitui? Yet we know the rollout is is across the country. Can he, no. Can he substantiate as per Standing Order 105, give us facts that Chief and Shah does not work in Kitui, and then we can work with facts. I would also be disappointed if it doesn't work in Kitui.
Senator Wambua.
Mr. Speaker, medical injustice against one patient is injustice against all patients. Mr. Speaker, that's the basis on which I'm making this statement. That, Mr. Speaker, this system, the implementation of it, has been hurried, has been rushed. Mr. Speaker, we have worked in institutions where we have carried out transitions. And there is a formula of doing transitions, Mr. Speaker. You don't just wake up one morning, stop a system that is working, and bring another system, Mr. Speaker, that very few people don't understand, Mr. Speaker. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, on that chief business. You know, Mr. Speaker, let us also take cognizance of the fact that the people of the northern frontier may not be able to enlist themselves for chief business because they are not under network connectivity. They are not covered.
Your time is up, Senator. Senator Wahome Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to add my voice to the presidential speech. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, sir, I do remember during the swearing in of the current deputy president that the president alluded to the fact that he has found himself working alone in this government. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've listened to my colleagues, and I must say, we believe in a society where a husband will lock the kitchen in the morning, walk away with the keys, but in the evening come home and demand food from the wife. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm also not lost to the fact that there are people, despite of all the effort you make, even when you are in the midst of a dam or a lake, they'll tell you you're blowing a lot of dust. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I want to say indeed the speech by the President and the much alluded to debate of the Adani deal in the Energy Committee, which I share. Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker, we spoke about it. We had gotten information that Adani had been inducted in the US, and we asked the CS, this new information that you did not have a couple of weeks ago, now that you have it, and I can remember, and it is on record, the CS said, in the wake of the new information, we need to sit down and see the way forward. And I will not be surprised that this is what the President alluded to, having gotten new information from our development partners, having gotten new information that this company has been induced in other countries, we have no option but to cancel the deal. Mr. Speaker, that to me is a bold decision. That to me is true leadership. True leadership, Mr. Speaker, is making the decision when you have the necessary information, but not based on the propaganda. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know we are moving in a very thin physical space in this country. And the only way to move this country forward, Mr. Speaker, is to embrace public-private partnership. And what I would request my fellow colleagues in this House, Mr. Speaker, if we think that we need to do thorough public participation before we embrace any proponent of public-private partnership, then let's enact that and make sure that it is enshrined in the Act. Mr. Speaker, it is also not lost to me, the President spoke about us being more people-centric. I do remember he spoke about the conflict of Bill Act. That was before this House, Mr. Speaker. I also do remember, Mr. Speaker, that the President spoke about the housing. I have had the opportunity of studying in Germany and working there for 20 years, Mr. Speaker. During my tenure and working with Germany, where I used to work for IBM, I had the opportunity to move across Europe. And I can tell you, what has formed the basis of the strong social structures in Europe is ensuring that they have houses for social purposes. What do I mean by that, Mr. Speaker? Very and rare will you see families in Germany living out in the cold because there is housing for every social class. Mr. Speaker, sir, after the unification of Germany, where East Germany was economically more downtrodden than the West, they came up with affordable housing model that ensured even the people living in East Germany were able to come up with standard. Mr. Speaker, sir, it surprises me when I listen to my colleagues here. We know that there's formal settlements, Madare, Kawangware, Mukuru kwa Ruben. We know in Nyeri we have Majengo. When will these people, Mr. Speaker, sir, up and in the line with the SDGs, live in houses that are decent, that are connected to sanitation, and which are spacious? Mr. Speaker, sir, unless somebody does not live in this country opposing affordable housing, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a decision that cannot be made by somebody who does not have the social welfare of the people in the hand. Mr. Speaker, sir, Kenya is a signatory of the Millennium Goals, and one of the Sustainable Development Goals, Mr. Speaker. And one of the requirements is that everybody must have access to affordable housing, decent housing. This can only be realized if we embrace the affordable housing project, Mr. Speaker. And the last point, Mr. Speaker, that people have lamented about is the Shah and the Chief. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want to invite the members to look at the social structures in Denmark, in Sweden, in Germany, where everybody, regardless of your social standing, regardless of how much you earn, you have access to the most sophisticated and medical services, regardless of how much you earn. Mr. Speaker, sir, my colleagues are lamenting that we are contributing 36,000 per month as members of parliament. And I would say, comparing that to the amount of money that I was contributing, and I'm happy because Senator Murango is here, he knows the amount of harambes that we attend every weekend, Mr. Speaker, just to support people who are not unable to pay their bills. What we need to do, Mr. Speaker, sir, the small teething problems that are there, we must address them. And that, Mr. Speaker, does not mean that addressing and does not mean castigating this system of chi and sha will justify the small problem. Mr. Speaker, let's work on it. Let's refine them. Let's address the shortfalls that are there. Let's address the teething problems that come with it and make sure that it works, because it is a right for every Kenyan to access affordable health. Mr. Speaker, Taifa Care, which is something that was attempted by the Kibaki government. It did not work. I do recall at that time, none other than Honorable Charity Gill was the Minister of Health. She did an attempt on it, it didn't work. We remember during the reign of Uhuru, it did not work. Mr. Speaker, it is the high time, and it is an opportunity to make this thing work, so that when the books of history are written, Mr. Speaker, it will be said, yes, this Senate enabled that to happen, and that will be done through ensuring that we put the legislative gaps stopped by registration and putting acts in there that will ensure that the loopholes are addressed. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not lost to us that we came to power having come from COVID, having faced one of the worst droughts in the last 40 years. Mr. Speaker, as I listened to my colleague, Senator Wambua, talk, I thought it doesn't even come from Mukambani, which was one of the most hard hit by the drought. And we know that we were not able for 3 consecutive years to service our foreign obligations. We were not able to repay the debts that were scheduled to be repaid. And therefore, cumulatively, we in this regime had to tackle all that. Mr. Speaker, it is not rocket science. When we came to power, the cost of living was high. When we came to power, inflation was high. It has come down. Let us not just oppose the president because we belong to the opposition. Let's listen and say, yes, there are shortfalls that we must address. One of the major shortfalls, Mr. Speaker, is corruption. Yes, we must address corruption. We must call it out and say yes, regardless of who you are in this country. And I would want to invite every one of us to subject ourselves into a kind of audition of the lifestyle to see what we are using, how we are living in the short time we've been in office. Could we have earned that much? Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the people going around and castigating the presidency and the government, they have amassed their wealth through corruption. We must be brave enough and bold enough to say enough is enough for lies, and this is the time that we are called upon as leaders to raise up and say we must support this country, because success of every Kenyan, regardless of where they are, Mr. Speaker, sir, is a success for every Kenyan. As I sit down, Mr. Speaker, I know that there is the proposed high Grand Falls Dam. I know that they also proposed high dams, mega dams in Nyeri County that have been promised since we got independence. But the physical space that we move around, Mr. Speaker, they cannot be realized unless we embrace public-private partnership. Mr. Speaker, sir, my request to my colleagues, my humble prayer to my colleague, let us address the gaps that are there so that we can deliver what Kenyans have waited for 60 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is so sad that we have now an education system that will ensure an orphan gets equal opportunity, the same as a child who's been born in a rich family. But I hear, Mr. Speaker, people opposing it. Mr. Speaker, it is a high time we as leaders now join hands and say we must work for Kenyans, regardless of where you come from. Whether you come from a marginalized community, whether you come from the Murima community, every child has a right to access education, and that can only be done if those kids who go to academies or even in the universities, they pay a little bit more than those who are orphans. Mr. Speaker, this is what the president is saying, an education system that will ensure everybody gets a light and everybody gets an opportunity, regardless of where we come from. Mr. Speaker, sir, it cannot also be the business of us as politicians. When you get sick, as a poor person, the next thing you start doing is making your coffin. Mr. Speaker, sir, we must give even those who've been born in poor families an opportunity to reclaim their life because they can access better medical services. This can only be done, Mr. Speaker, if we support Chi and Cha. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Daniel Kitonga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to comment. Yeah, those are my names, Daniel Kitonga Manzo. K. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, let me say that this speech came as a requirement of the Constitution, and the President is supposed to address the two houses to the state of the nation. Mr. Speaker, quite a number of things have been said. And most important, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of agriculture. Mr. Speaker, we are aware in this country there was a big fertilizer scandal. I am in the Agriculture Committee. We followed up the matter. We brought all the evidence that there was fake fertilizer in the country. That matter has just been swept into the carpet. A solution has not been given. The farmers who lost or who are sold fake fertilizer have not been given proper fertilizer. The crop was poor out of that. And Mr. Speaker, this matter is still not settled, and farmers are not certain whether with this season now, when we are doing farming, they are going to have fertilizer, which is going to make their crops do better. And fertilizers is a very, very important thing. You cannot be sure. There is no guarantee, absolutely,
Senator,
from the government that it will be done.
Senator Kitonga,
Yes.
would you like to be informed by Senator Cherargei?
No, I don't want to be informed by Senator Cherargei. He belonged to the same lie government, and most probably he lied to me. He will not inform me.
Senator Cherargei, what's your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I would not wish to interrupt my brother, but Standing Order 105. You remember, for us who are farmers, it is unfair for Senator Manzo to mislead the public. Yet when this issue of fake fertilizer came out, the National Cereals and Produce Board encouraged farmers to report any fake fertilizer for compensation, Mr. Speaker. To say on the floor of the House that nothing has been done, Mr. Speaker, even if we have to bash government, let us also be fair in terms of the truth, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, the farmers in Makueni reported and none has been compensated.
Just one moment. Senator Majority Leader, what is your point of order?
I know that Senator Manzo is a member of the Agriculture Committee. You know, Mr. Speaker, there is a new trend that is emerging where politicians are becoming clickbait addicts. They want to say things just to get likes and on TikTok. Mr. Speaker, can Senator Manzo table before this House the report of their committee and the recommendations that they made, because he's a member of the Agriculture Committee on this fertilizer issue, and how he voted if eventually it made it to this House?
Mr. Speaker, I am true to the facts of the report. I'm aware it's been worked on. It's going to be tabled in this House.
Then it is you was that.
It is here. The report is already in this House, Mr. Speaker. And it is clear that the chairman of the committee is here, is going to contribute, and you tell you. It is here. Can I allow the chairman of the committee to inform me, Mr. Speaker? Because it's just becoming a back and forth argument. Yet you know there is fake fertilizer in the country and no one has ever been compensated. The chairman.
Do you want Senator Kirinyaga, do you want to inform the Honorable Senator? Give him the mic.
Yeah, the mic is there.
Mstahiki Spika, niko kidogo na shida ya koo, kwa hivyo sitaweza kwa sasa.
Mr. Speaker, I still insist that none of the farmers in the country have been compensated, yes, and nothing has been done about it by the government of Kenya. That's supposed to be done by the Minister of Agriculture. We have summoned them several times, and they have appeared, and they say they will rectify that, yet it has not been done, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, oh yes, that's a position, Mr. Speaker. That's a position, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mundingi, what is your point of order?
Asanti Bwana Spika, mimi ni naibu mdogo wa mwenyekiti wa kamati ya agriculture ambaye Senator Manzo wa Makueni ako katika ile kamati. Anadanganya Kenya mzima kwa sababu anakumbuka vizuri wakati tulikuwa nafanya upelelezi, parliament ilifanya upelelezi na waziri wa kilimo akatimuliwa. Kwa hivyo kama alitimuliwa, hakuna kitu kingine tungeweza kufanya. Kwa hivyo Bwana Manzo unadanganya sisi, na nikitaka kusema kitu kingine nataka nikulipue. Unakumbuka wewe ulienda kwa waziri wa kilimo. Asante Bwana Speaker.
I want to say that no.
Senator, one moment. The minister. Order, senators, order. Senator Mohamed Faki, what is your point of order?
Mheshimiwa Spika, nafikiri aliyekuwa seneta na waziri wa kilimo Mheshimiwa Linturi hakutimiliwa katika bunge. Mswada wa kumuondoa mamlakani ulishindwa katika bunge la kitaifa. Kwa hivyo si sawa kwa Mheshimiwa Mundigi kusema kwamba alitimuliwa.
Minority Leader.
Angalia Hansard.
Minority Leader, what is your point of order?
Asante mstahiki Spika. Kwa hoja yangu ya nidhamu ni kwamba aliposema kwamba Maanzo Senator Maanzo, wajua kuharibiana majina ndani ya bunge, saa nyingine Wakenya wote wanaangalia. Heshima lazima tuiweke mbele. Lakini ikiwa tutaketi hapa na kuanza kusema maneno ambayo baadaye yataweza kuleta kashfa, nikizingatia kwamba ndugu yangu Maanzo yeye kila asubuhi yuko kwenye maruninga, kwa hiyo itakuwa si heshima kwa jina lake kuharibiwa namna hiyo. Nataka kuuliza tu ya kwamba kama alivyosema ya kwamba nataka kutoboa siri, ya kwamba mimi nataka kutoboa siri, anapo akasema Maanzo alienda kwa waziri, hiyo ni kumaanisha nini? Anaweza kufananua?
Senator Mundingi, lazima ufafanue matamshi yako.
Mimi ningetaka kusema mimi nilikuwa mwenyekiti mdogo wa kamati, na kila mara kwa sababu parliament ilikuwa imepitisha na akawa karibu aweze kufutwa kazi, kila mara nikiwa mwenyekiti Manzo alikuwa anataka tuende tukakutane na waziri, lakini nikamwambia hii haiwezekani. Lakini kama haikuwezekana, mimi nikafikiria bwana Manzo alienda. Asante.
Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the former Minister of Agriculture was a member of this House, and in many times when we took him on in this particular matter, he used to get surprised on this floor as to the issue of fertilizer. And you remember the first time he denied there was fake fertilizer in the country. When we proved him wrong, he said he had been misled. And in fact, according to him, and that's why we will meet him a lot of times, even outside here, when we are taking a break, he'll say other people did this fake fertilizer and misled him. So he admitted that there was fake fertilizer in the country, and I am insisting, take your statistics. At least in Makueni, no farmer has been compensated, and I'm sure no farmer in the country has been compensated. For if any farmer has been compensated, it is with what budget? Did this House approve any budget? I can assure you, there's no single farmer who has been compensated, and therefore the government must compensate the farmers.
What is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, accuracy of fact standing order number 5. Why don't Senator Maanzo table evidence? Because where I come from, farmers were substituted with good fertilizer, Mr. Speaker. Is it in order for Senator Maanzo to gaslight the country to say that nothing was done about compensation on fake fertilizer, Mr. Speaker? Can you tell him to table evidence? Because where I come from, the government has done the necessary rectifiable measures against farmers who got a fake fertilizer, Mr. Speaker, and they did register for compensation. Can he give evidence, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the nation and the people of Makueni who have elected me no, and they are the ones I represent. At least for the count I represent, no farmer has been compensated. And the government does not expect good produce having fake fertilizer in the country, and then nothing is being done about it. Yet agriculture is the backbone of this nation.
Senator Manzo, the Honorable Senator from Nandi has stood in a point of order for substantiating your statement to be factual. And he is asking if you're able to table evidence to the fact that not a single farmer from your county was compensated or had their fake fertilizer substituted with proper fertilizer. Are you able to table that evidence, Senator Manzo?
He has said in his county they have been compensated. Can you also table evidence to show that in your county the farmers have been compensated, Mr. Speaker?
Senator,
you have also alleged. You have also alleged you are a lawyer.
Senator Cherargei,
So both of us should table evidence.
Senator Cherargei and Senator Manzo, we will not engage in the two of you exchanging on the floor of the House. Senator Cherargei stood on a point of order that you substantiate the fact that not a single farmer in your county was either compensated or had the fake fertilizer substituted. At this point in time, it is for you to provide that evidence.
Mr.
Will
Speaker,
you be able to
I'll provide
substantiate?
the evidence.
Very well.
After 1 week.
After 1 week. Very well, Senator. Please proceed. Senator Manzo, will you be able to provide it by tomorrow?
I'll do my level best to get the information from the Ministry of Agriculture.
Very well. Please
Because there's
conclude.
none.
Senator Manzo, don't engage.
Yes, I love to.
Order.
The information will only come from the minister.
Order, senators. Order, Senator. Senator Manzo.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
You will substantiate by tomorrow. In the meantime, proceed with your submission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and a lot of my time has been wasted by Senator Cherargei with his denials.
We will add for you time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, about the CBC education, Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest failures is that although it was started in a different system and it is ongoing, Mr. Speaker, there are questions which the government cannot answer. Why are you building an extra class in the primary schools and leaving an unattended class at the high school? Mr. Speaker, this particular activity is a very big expense to the country. Mr. Speaker, it has caused confusion to a lot of learning children, and my suggestion on this particular matter would be that, Mr. Speaker, then it is better for the nation to have a system whereby we do not have wastage in terms of an empty classroom, yet we are building another one, Mr. Speaker. One can only conclude that this was done to benefit a few business people, and also the same thing applies with the printing of books, Mr. Speaker. And the CBC right now is unconstitutional in the fact that the CBC expects, Mr. Speaker, that you serve all Kenyans equally. If a primary school has no internet, has no education, then it will not equate same service to a child from a privileged region which has those facilities, Mr. Speaker. So this currently is unconstitutional, can only best be implemented when you have electricity in every home in the country, electricity in every school in the country, and internet in every school and in every home in the country. Mr. Speaker, then, only then will you say the children are being served equally, and therefore that's a matter I think the government should look about, should take care about. Mr. Speaker, about abductions, I would like to say that there are abductions in the country. I participated in the case of Bob Jackie, representing the Law Society of Kenya. Bob Jackie was abducted for more than 30 days. In his abduction, there were other people, Mr. Speaker, and therefore, the police cannot deny that there are no abductions in the country. They should give the president proper information that, Mr. Speaker, extrajudicial activities and extrajudicial killings have happened, and if the president wants that information, he should have one-on-one with Bob Jackie, and you know that quite a number of people are still missing in the country. Others are in the city mortuary, Mr. Speaker. Quite a number of people in the city mortuary who have not been claimed. And the other day, the government went to court to dispose the bodies, Mr. Speaker. What should happen in that particular scenario is that and I have a question pending here for the new Minister for Interior, that they should have taken fingerprints of all these people, and everybody will be informed through their chief that the whereabouts of their missing child in Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. And similarly, on the femicide, Mr. Speaker, in the country, and even the abductions on ladies in the country, Mr. Speaker, it is true that, Mr. Speaker, Article 137 must be followed, and that so long as you are, as the President says, so long as you are demonstrating within the law, then you should not be confronted, Mr. Speaker. What we saw is a proposal of law in Parliament to control demonstrations against Article 37, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we all follow the law, we all listen, as the President said. And one of the major things, Mr. Speaker, which will come out clearly on this particular issue is the rule of law. The rule of law anticipates, Mr. Speaker, fairness, and therefore, and especially in elections, and therefore, urgent formation of IBC is important. It has to be done urgently, Mr. Speaker. And at the same time, we have many projects in the country which have not taken place. The Senator for Nyeri has talked of an upcoming dam. I want to say that Twake Dam is not yet completed. Konza City is not yet
just
completed.
Just one moment, Senator Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, please resume your seat. Is it in order for Senator for Makueni, who is a member of the Wiper Democratic Movement, a party under whose dispute, because the dispute that exists at PPLC is courtesy of your membership not being able to agree on who will represent them in the IBC selection panel, and they have gone all the way to the Supreme Court. Therefore, you are the party that are causing us the delay in the constitution of IBC. So instead of addressing Senator Maanzo, what you should do, you and your party leader, is to sort the dispute that exists in Wiper Party so that PPLC can send the nominee that you guys agree to, and we can have a new selection panel, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to you misleading us, yet you know you are the cause of the delay in IBC selection.
There is no dispute in Wiper Party. There is a new matter which has been filed in the Kiambu Court, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, that new matter has not been filed by ourselves. It has conveniently been filed by people who support the government of today. And it is my presumption that it is the current government which is delaying this particular activity, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, when it comes also, Mr. Speaker, to the issue of Mr. Andani, Mr. Speaker, I have said in the media several times that Andani was an international criminal, suspected all over the world, has quite a number of cases, and yet the current government did not do due diligence. It is only when he was indicted in New York, the government quickly, that morning, changed his mind, which I want to commend it for. And I want to say Shah and Schiff is also associated with Andani, and it is one of the areas the president should now pronounce himself that Andani must also leave any activity associated with.
It's okay, Senator. Senator is already done, so we'll just proceed. Senator Mundingi.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa ruhusa niweze kuchangia mjadala ambaye ilikuwa siku ya Jumatano wa rais wa Kenya ambaye alizungumza akiwa katika parliament, na parliament ilikuwa pamoja na hapa house, maseneta wote tulikuwa pale. Bwana Spika, mimi naunga mkono kwa sababu utupa ya rais iligusia mambo ya agriculture, ambaye mimi ni mwenyekiti mdogo wa kamati ya agriculture, na vile alizungumzia njia mrefu sana, kwa sababu nakumbuka wakati Bwana Spika serikali ya Kenya Kwanza iliweza kushinda, tulikuta kitu inaitwa fertilizer ikiwa inatoka shilingi 6,500, na wakati huu kwa hii kipindi ya miaka 2 imekuwa ikitoka shilingi 2,500, ndio pia mwananchi aweze kuwa pesa mkononi. Mambo ya agriculture aligusia na njia hii. Tukifuatilia mambo ya kilimo ni njia moja ya kuchangia uchumi wa Kenya, kwa sababu watu wengi mambo ya kilimo unakuta mambo ya agriculture ni mambo ya fertilizer, ni mambo ya kilimo, ni mambo ya kahawa, majani, makandamia, mirasto kumugoka, na pia pamba, na pia upande mwingine wa Rift Valley unakuta huko ni miwa, na pia na vitu zingine, na pia hata maembe iko katika mambo ya kilimo. Na wakati huu tukiangalia mambo ya kilimo, sasa unakuta kama kungewezekana, na najua atatimisha, ni kila county zote 47 iweze kujengewa damu kubwa, ndio hii kilimo iweze kuendelea na njia ile inafaa, kwa sababu tumeangalia kama mambo ya maziwa bei yake tunataka iwe shilingi 50 na kila mwananchi awe kilipwa kwa kipindi ya mwezi mmoja. Mambo ya kilimo alichangia Nigeria inavaa kwa sababu Biblia inasema muko na macho na muoni na muko na masikio amusikii. Kwa sababu ukiangalia mambo ya majani saa hii kila mtu anaserekea kwa sababu kilimo ya majani inalete faida Nigeria anja hii kuonekana katika kwa hii kipindi ya miaka ingine. Hata kahawa, bei ya kahawa imeenda juu. Kitu ingine anachangia tukiwa upande ya kilimo ya agriculture. Anataka kila kilimo ya agriculture iwe value addition, ndio kila kitu yote irundi masinani kwa sababu kilimo iko katika kaunti zetu zote kwa sababu iko katika ukatusi. Bwana Spika, njia ingine aligusia, ningesema ni njia changamoto ningeomba katika Seneti hii tumushikilie kwa hii kipindi iko kwa sababu aligusia mambo ya walimu na tumegundua mambo ya walimu kwa kipindi ya rais ambaye alistaafu na ule mwingine. Kwa hii kipindi kwa miaka 2 serikali ya Kenya Kwanza imeajiri walimu 56 na saa hii tunasikia tena ataongezea walimu wengine. Kwa hivyo ningeomba tumushikilie ndio tuweze kuona vile upande wa elimu itaendelea. Ingawa kuna shinda ya mambo ya shule ya university, hiyo inafaa iangaliwe. Ile shinda iliyoko katika serikali yetu ya Kenya ni kuwa rais wetu wa Kenya anajaribu kupandilisha upande zote, wizara zote na akisema, lakini watu wa kwenda masinani kuvunja watu vile serikali inafanya, hiyo ndio ile shinda iko. Vitu zingine aligusia ni mambo ya afya ambaye ya SHA na mambo ya SHI. Ingeomba tusikilie serikali ya Kenya Kwanza mkono kwa sababu ingawa sisi wafanyikazi wote tunateseka na tunaumia kwa kukatwa pesa. Kama sisi unakuta watu wengine wanakatwa shilingi 20,000, zingine 30,000, lakini tunaeleshwa na tumeambiwa ikifika SHA ianze kufanya kazi na njia ile inavaa ati watu wote juu ya kanza na magonjwa ile ambaye ni kifua kikuu na imetusumbua sana tukiwa wajumbe kwenda pale masinani na kufanya harambee, na kama watu wataelimishwa vile inavaa na pesa iunganishwe njia ile inavaa ati mambo ya hao magonjwa yote hakuna watakuwa nalipa pesa. Kwa ile shinda tulio nayo ni watu wa kulete kumafunzo katika masinani kusema serikali imefanya kazi namna gani. Mambo ingine aligusia ama mimi ningeweza kuongezea kama senator wa Embu County ni kukumbusha kwa hii kipindi ya miaka 2. Nataka kusema ile serikali ilikuwako ya Kibaki walisema kila mtu akifikisha miaka 70 au akipata pesa na serikali ya Uhuru haikuongezea watu, lakini kwa hii kipindi tunajua mtu wote amefikisha miaka 70 sasa anapata pesa kila mwezi. Kwa hivyo tunaonelea kama tungemshikilia na njia ile inafaa, tunaona serikali ya Kenya Kwanza ingeendelea njia ile inafaa. Kitu kingine nikimalizia ni mambo ya health promoters vijijini. Pesa ya wale wanafanya kazi ya health promoters siku hizi wanalipwa shilingi 5,000, ingawa kuna shinda kwa sababu ile pesa tunataka kusaidia kupatia county government. MPs wanakataa, unakuta iko na matatizo. Hata ningeomba MPs watuongezee zile pesa ndio health promoters wale wamepatiwa pesa na serikali ya Kenya Kwanza, Bwana Spika, hawa watu waweze kuendelea kupata misaada. Nikimalizia mambo ya ndani aligusia, nataka niambie senator wa Nairobi na senator wa Manzo wa Makoeni na senator wa Kitui ambaye ni bishop, nataka nimwambie mpaka tumukumbari tusaidie serikali ya Kenya Kwanza iweze kufanya kazi ile navaa. Hata Rome katika Biblia haikujengwa na siku moja. Kwa hivyo ile ngeomba tusikilie serikali, na ndio lisikia siku hiyo rais alisema mambo ya Kenya Airways hiyo procurement na mambo ya kampuni ambayo ile ilikuwa imepatiwa kazi ya Kentraco ameputilia mbali, na akasema kutoka sasa kutamikiwa SUA utakuta mambo ya procurement itakuwa ni citizen. Hii citizen. Kwa hivyo ningeomba sio kila siku Bwana Spika mambo ni kupigana hapa na pale. Ningeomba serikali tuishikilie wakati huu, na tunaona serikali economy inaenda vizuri. Nakumbuka aligusia mambo ya inflation ilikuwa 9%, sasa iko 2.7%. Kwa hivyo ningeomba Bwana Spika, tuungane pamoja, kwa sababu moja ni nguvu. Ndio hii serikali ya Kenya Kwanza iko na maono, tuone tutafika namna gani kwa hii kipindi. Kwa hiyo Bwana Spika, mimi naunga mkono. Nikimalizia ni kusema sisi wote, sio kila wakati yote ni kupiga serikali. Nataka kusema mambo ya MBC. Nakumbuka mwaka jana mambo ya MBC sisi tulipitisha tukua kwa serikali ya Kenya Kwanza, lakini tulipitisha watu 7, lakini ikapinduka kasemekana watu wa Azimio ama wengine mpaka kuongezewa watu 2. Sasa hiyo ndio imeleta shinda. Kwa hivyo ninaomba sisi wote tukiwa maseneta tuungane pamoja, ndio tusikilie serikali ya Kenya Kwanza, na tukifanya hivyo uchumi ya serikali ya Kenya Kwanza na kaunti 47 yote itakuwa imekuwa ni mzuri. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, mimi naunga mkono. Ni mimi Senator wa Embu County, Daktari Alexander Munyi Mundigi. Asante Bwana Spika.
Mohamed Faki.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kunipa fursa hii kuchangia hotuba ya Rais kwa bunge ambayo ilitolewa mnamo tarehe 21 mwezi huu wa 11 kuambatana na kifungu cha 132 1C cha katiba yetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningeanza kwa kumpongeza Rais kwa kuweza kutekeleza jukumu hili la kikatiba, kwa sababu ni jukumu ambalo ni muhimu sana kuweza kulijulisha bunge na taifa kulingana na vigezo ambavyo amewekewa kwa katiba hiyo. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni masikitiko kwamba katika hotuba hii Rais hakuzungumzia masuala ya ugatuzi, kwamba hotuba yake yote haikuzungumzia masuala ya serikali za kaunti ambayo ni kiungo muhimu katika nchi yetu kwa sasa. Mheshimiwa Spika, itakumbuka kwamba tulikuwa na mvutano juu ya sheria ya dola, ambapo mpaka wiki iliyokwisha ndio kamati ile ya uwiano iliweza kukubaliana kwa masuala ya pesa ngapi zitakwenda kwa kaunti zetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa hiyo kutoka mwezi wa 7 mwaka huu mpaka mwezi wa 10, Mheshimiwa Spika, fedha za kaunti zilikuwa hazijulikani ni ngapi. Kwa hivyo kuna shida ya kuweza kupelekewa pesa kaunti zetu na hazina kuu. Mheshimiwa Spika, japokuwa sheria inatoa fursa kwa hazina kuu kulipa mpaka nusu ya pesa ambazo zilipelekwa katika kaunti zetu kwa mwaka uliotangulia, serikali imekuwa na shida kuweza kupeleka pesa kwa kaunti zetu. Hivyo basi kuziweka serikali za gatuzi zote katika nchi yetu ya Kenya katika hali ngumu ya kuweza kulipa madeni na kulipia huduma ambazo wanatoa katika kaunti zetu tofauti tofauti. Na japokuwa wiki 2 zilizokwisha pesa ziliweza kupelekwa kwa kaunti hizo, Mheshimiwa Spika, kaunti nyingi zimeweza kupata hasara kwa sababu ilibidi wakope pesa kwa riba ya juu ili ziweze kulipa mishahara na waweze kulipia huduma katika kaunti zao. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo la pili ambalo pia limenisikitisha ni hali ya haki za binadamu katika nchi yetu. Tumeona wakati wa maandamano ya Gen Z vijana wengi walipigwa risasi na kuuliwa kiholela. Mheshimiwa Spika, japokuwa Rais aliweza kutoa hakikisho kwamba wale wote ambao waliua bila ya hatia wataweza kuchukuliwa hatua, lakini mpaka sasa Mheshimiwa Spika, hatujaona jambo lolote ambalo limefanyika kutekeleza azimio hilo la Rais, na vile vile pia kuhakikishia familia za wale ambao wameondokewa kwamba haki itatendeka kuhusiana na watoto wao na jamaa zao. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo lingine la kusikitisha pia ni kwamba masuala ya utekaji nyara yamezidi katika nchi yetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, ya karibuni ni kisa ambacho wahamiaji 4 wa asili ya Kiturki waliweza kutekwa nyara hapa Nairobi na wakapelekwa Turkey bila ya familia zao kujulishwa wala bila ya kufuata njia ya sheria. Mheshimiwa Spika, sheria yetu inatoa fursa kwamba ikiwa mhalifu yuko hapa na anatakana katika nchi nyingine, kwamba kuna makubaliano kati ya nchi yetu na ile nchi, anatakana apelekwe kotini afanyiwe kesi ya uhamisho ili aweze kwenda kushtakiwa na yale makosa ambayo yako kule. Lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona kwamba watu walichukuliwa kiholela wao wa Turki wakapelekwa wakarejeshwa Istanbul ili kushtakiwa katika nchi ile kwa makosa ambayo hayajulikani. Mheshimiwa Spika, hii ikikumbukwa kwamba hawa walikuwa ni wahamiaji halali katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, ina maana kwamba mhamiaji yoyote hayuko salama na ile nchi ambayo amehamia. Mheshimiwa Spika, mwingine ambaye amechukuliwa wiki mbili zilizopita ni kiongozi wa upinzani Dr. Kiza Besigye ambaye alichukuliwa hapa Nairobi pia katika hali hizo hizo. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, utekaji nyara na mauaji ya kiholela extrajudicial killings ni mambo ambayo rais angeweza kuyazungumzia kwa undani zaidi, kwa sababu ni mambo ambayo yanahusiana na usalama wa Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi naona kwamba hata mimi mwenyewe pia binafsi sina usalama kwamba ikiwa mtu anaweza kutekwa nyara akenda akauliwa, na wengi wameuliwa vijana ambao walishiriki katika maandamano ya Gen Z. Mheshimiwa Spika, vile vile rais tulimtarajia kwamba atazungumzia zile cheche ambazo vijana wa Gen Z walikuwa nazo wakati walipoandamana mpaka katika bunge hili mwezi wa 6 mwaka huu. Mheshimiwa Spika, lakini rais hakuweza kuyazungumzia hayo. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa hivyo ni wazi kwamba mambo mengi ambayo yanaathiri wa Kenya, Mheshimiwa Rais pamoja na washauri wake hawayasikizi na wala hawayafuati. Mheshimiwa Spika, tutaona pia kwamba japokuwa Kenya yetu ni demokrasia, masuala haya ya mauaji ya kiholela, masuala haya ya utekaji nyara, masuala haya ya kugandamiza haki za binadamu kupitia kwa mambo kama mauaji na mengineo yanatia doa nchi yetu, kwa sababu nchi yetu ni nchi ambayo iko katika ile tunaitwa kwa Kiingereza Community of Nations. Tumesaini mikataba mingi, tumesaini mikataba ya kuwalinda wahamiaji, tumesaini mikataba ya kulinda haki za binadamu, tumesaini mikataba mingi Mheshimiwa Spika ambayo hatuwezi kuipuuza kwa sababu sisi tumekubalika katika community ile tunaitwa Community of Nations. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, hotuba hii haikukamilika Mheshimiwa Spika kwa sababu mambo ambayo tumeyazungumzia ni mambo ambayo ni muhimu, ilikuwa yafaa yazungumziwe na rais katika hotuba yake. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Tabitha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise, Mr. Speaker, to really appreciate the President for his precise, timely, and direct to the point address of the nation last week on Thursday, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me start by really appreciating on the topic and on the issue of the femicide that the President was able to touch on, Mr. Speaker. As women leaders, Mr. Speaker, we were very delighted when this subject matter was also addressed at his level, because this is a national crisis issue, Mr. Speaker. This is an issue that we strongly condemn. And also I want to pass my quick recovery remarks to one Florence Wanjiko, who's currently recovering in Nakuru Hospital after the heinous actions by one Mr. Elias, Mr. Speaker. These are the issues, Mr. Speaker, that even the President condemns highly. And I really want to appreciate the fact that he has also directed that there be GBV desks at the county level, at the mashinani level, whereby women can be able to quickly get services and quick responsive services, unlike where these desks have been situated currently at the police stations, and it has been a challenge such that when these accidents occur, it becomes a challenge for women to come out and be able to address this particular issue, because they look as if they are just domestic matters and they should just go back and address their own domestic issues. But when these desks have been directed to be narrowed to the mashinani level, Mr. Speaker, then it gives a wider coverage area as far as the issues of femicide are concerned in this country. On the same, he also talked that let there be different parenting as far as the boy child is concerned. Let them be strengthened so that even when it comes to societal matters, family matters, the boy child grows to more responsible, and these issues that we are seeing that are coming from the men will definitely be reduced in future, is what we pray for, Mr. Speaker. So we really appreciate him on that. The cancellation of the contract for Adani, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when you remember when the issue of Adani came out, there were so many concerns, especially from our brothers and sisters working at the Kenya Airports Authority, who voiced out and said they were not comfortable with this kind of agreement that they felt is coming, and they did not really get to understand. Mr. Speaker, this cancellation is an indication that the president is listening to the people. When you remember on the issue of the education funding model, the students from the university level raised concerns on the model structure that has been implemented. And the president took his time, did a county hall meeting, and was able to have a conversation with the comrades from the different universities in this country. Still another indication that he's still listening to the people. Mr. Speaker, further to that, if you remember a few months back when Parliament was invaded because of the issue of the finance bill, then what happened? The president did not assent. Still an indication that is a listening president, because there has been concerns. Is he really listening? And the cancellation of Adani last week by the president is a total evidence that he's is going to continue to listen, and is a listening president, so that these issues that Kenyans raise can be able to be addressed, and addressed in a better way. It is a high time as a country we embrace the PPP system, because looking at our financial status, the recurrent expenditure is very high, and we need the PPPs so as to develop the infrastructures that are going to improve and our economy moving forward. Mr. Speaker, on his address still, the president touched on the issue of the teachers. And we are very happy because this year alone, there has been employment for over 56,000 teachers in our country, cutting across, which then improves our education system, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, Speaker, there is a plan next year, January, to be able to recruit 20,000 teachers. This process is ongoing. Within these 2 years, we'll be achieving 76,000 teachers employment, something that has not happened within the past years. And this is a big stride. And this is going to ensure even the issues that are currently raised, the issues of concern by our young people, with the stable education system, it's going to ensure it addresses mostly this issue. The agricultural sector, and narrowing it to the pricing and the cost of the fertilizer, which has gone down to 2,500. The VAT cut cost on the raw materials for products like the pesticide, which still narrows the cost of production for our produce for the end user, Mr. Speaker. Lowering of those cost of prices then lowers the commodity price. Case example, the cost of unga. Hence, we achieve the food security factor. These prices have been lowered, and these are some of the reasons that brought about the cost of production going down. Fertilizers played a very key role, and this is a very big impact to us as a country. Mr. Speaker, the issue of Taifa Care is something that the president brings it out with a lot of passion. Both houses passed this particular bill, the universal health care. And the chief takes care broadly from the issue of emergencies. Today, when you find the way it has been when someone gets an accident, Some Kenyans have been lenient enough to be able to assist them, some have not. And the reason has been then when you get them to this particular hospital, then who takes care of the bill? But right now as we speak, SHIF takes care in such a way that when you take this particular patient to the hospital, the SHIF requires that they should be given medical care. At the same time, it narrows it to the outpatient, inpatient care that, of course, NHIF took care. Further to that now, it takes care of the chronic diseases, Mr. Speaker. Case example, cancer. People have had to do contributions to travel out of the country to be able to get medical specialization, medical care. And this is a very expensive affair, Mr. Speaker, financially. It has drained families. People have lost their loved one because they have to travel out of this country, which is very expensive, to be able to get adequate medical attention. With SHIF in place, it is taking care of chronic diseases. Mr. Speaker, also, the fund is going to have a facility maintenance for the equipments within these hospitals, whereby the facilities are going to be up to date, such that people do not need to get the answer of that there is no machinery or the machine has a challenge and you cannot be able to get your medical test and all that. So the fund still narrows and ensures that the fund is going to ensure that the equipments within the different hospitals are maintained to the standard. And still, there can be an opportunity for the hospitals to acquire more modern machines that are up to date, that are able to take care of the modern technology that is in place. Talking about technology, Mr. Speaker, the President talked about the issue of digitalization. As we speak, when we started actually, we had about 300 digital services in this country. But as we speak, that has increased to about 25,000 e-services in this country. And we look forward for at least 99 or even achieving 100% of all government entities offering their services in a digital manner. And I speak as the ambassador of ICDL, and I'm a champion of digital literacy. And so, the aspect of digital, even where we've seen constituencies through the members of parliament have been able to set the digital hubs, which not only create jobs, Mr. Speaker, but are able to ensure that the services that the government is offering are spread across all over, Mr. Speaker. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, the President was able to talk about the issue of the protest. And the Constitution is very clear, Mr. Speaker, as far as the protests are concerned, that protests are allowed, but they need to be peaceful. Demonstrations and picketing need to be very peaceful. No one has said, the President did not say that only a specific group or
Senator Matzayo.
Asante sana mstahiki Spika. Mstahiki Spika, kwanza kabisa nataka nimpatie kongole rais kwa kuweza kutoa taarifa yake kwa nchi nzima ya Kenya ya mwaka huu. Sikudhani, kwa sababu siku zilikuwa zinayoyoma na mwaka unaendelea kuisha, kalenda yetu ya bunge ilikuwa imefika mwisho, tumebaki tuna kama siku 6 ama 7 bunge kuweza kueneza kupelekwa katika likizo. Lakini ni vyema alikuja na aliweza kutoa hotuba kwa taifa ya mwaka wake wa 2024. Cha muhimu katika hotuba ya rais huwa ni kawaida aweze kugusia mambo mbalimbali ya muhimu ambayo wananchi wa Kenya wangependa kuyasikia na wangependa kuona ya kwamba suluhisho limepatikana. Mheshimiwa Spika, Bwana Rais katika hotuba yake aliyotoa hakuweza kugusia kitu cha muhimu ambacho kilitendeka mwaka huu katika majengo yetu ya bunge, ikiwa anatoa taarifa yake ya nchi, na vile vile alikuja kutoa hiyo taarifa akiwa ndani ya bunge. Na kitendo cha muhimu kilichotendeka ndani ya bunge ni kwamba kuna vijana wa kike na kiume waliumizwa, waliuawa huko nje katika majengo katika barabara tofauti tofauti za hapa Nairobi, na hususan wengi waliweza kupoteza maisha yao ndani ya bunge. Kwa hiyo lilikuwa jambo la muhimu kuona kwamba rais katika hotuba yake ya mwaka wa 2024 akiwa ndani ya bunge, ambapo vijana wadogo wachanga Gen Z waliweza kupigwa risasi na polisi wetu na wakafa. Ni wengi, hatuwezi kusema ni wangapi, lakini ni wengi waliopata maafa, na ni wengi pia waliopata majeraha, na ni wengi pia ambao hivi sasa bado wako hospitali, na ni wengi pia ambao hivi sasa walifariki na hawakujulikana, wazazi wao na watafuta, hawezi kuelewa wako wapi. Kwa hiyo lilikuwa jambo la muhimu katika hotuba yake aweze kueleza Wakenya kinaga ubaga, hawa watoto wengine waliopotea wako wapi, hawa walioumia wameweza kupata matibabu, hawa ambao hawakuumia lakini waliweza kuumia kidogo kidogo wakaenda hospitali, je, bili zao zimelipwa? Na wale ambao waliweza kupoteza maisha yao, je, serikali imechukua hatua gani, ikiwa bunge lenyewe limepitisha ya kwamba hao waliopoteza maisha na wale walioumia waweze kulipwa kulingana na yale maumivu yao, ama kulingana na pesa walizoweza kupata kulipa ili kuwezesha wapendwa wao wale waliozikwa. Bwana Spika, la pili ni kwamba ilikuwa ni muhimu aweze kukemea ama aweze kusema katika hotuba yake kwamba hakufurahi na vitendo vilivyofanywa na polisi vya kuweza kutumia nguvu zaidi ya vile ambavyo walikuwa wamefundishwa kule Kiganjo, ili wakikutana na kesi kama hivyo, na hawa ni vijana wadogo, waliruka wakaingia hapa, wakaenda dining, wakakula chakula, wengine wakaingia ndani hapa ndani ya bunge, wakasema wale waliosema, lakini yote tisa na 10 ni kwamba kuna watoto wetu ambao waliweza kuumia. Bwana Spika, sasa watu wamesonga mbele. Wale walioumia wakati wa mgomo, nataka kuona ya kwamba rais baadaye atatafakari na ataweza kuchukua hatua ya kuona kwamba hao vijana wetu wa Gen Z wameweza kupata afueni katika mahospitali, katika yale mazishi waliopata, kama kulikuwa na mazishi, pesa zao zimelipwa, na hatimaye vile vile wale ambao walifariki ama walifanya ajali mbalimbali, huduma za kuwasaidia zimetendeka. Cha pili, Bwana Spika, ningependa kama katika hotuba yake pia tukizingatia kwamba elimu ndio msingi wa maendeleo. Katika hotuba hii mambo ya elimu yalikuwa muhimu sana, hususan natueleze ya kwamba ni kwa nini hivi sasa katika historia ya Kenya tokea ipate uhuru kumekuwa na migomo mingi sana. Kila sekta tunaona kuna migomo, lakini ya muhimu zaidi ni kwamba kumekuwa na migomo ya walimu, kuanzia university mpaka hizi KUPPET na NAT. Kumekuwa na migomo tofauti mara nyingi. Ni nini inazusha hii migomo? Hilo ni jambo muhimu ambalo angekuwa lizingatia katika hotuba yake ya mwaka huu. Akatueleza ni hatua gani serikali inachukua kuona ya kwamba migomo ya walimu ambayo inatendeka kila uchao, mpaka hivi sasa tunavyoongea sasa, maprofesa wa university wameenda kutoka Moi University, kutoka pengine ni Nairobi University, kutoka wapi, kila mahali watu wamegoma. Kwa hiyo Bwana Spika, ingekuwa muhimu zaidi kuona ya kwamba rais mwenyewe ameweza kuweka hiyo katika taarifa yake, ambao anahutubia wa Kenya mwaka huu, lakini hakuweza kuiweka. Na hiyo migomo mpaka hivi sasa inaendelea, hakuweza kutupatia suluhu ambalo lilikuwa ni jukumu lake la muhimu kuambia wa Kenya, ili watoto wetu ambao tunawapeleka university waweze kumaliza masomo yao wakati unaohitajika, sio kwamba wanaketi kule kozi ya miaka 4 wanafanya miaka 6. Itakuwa si jambo la heshima, si jambo zuri. Ya mwisho Bwana Spika, si mwisho lakini nataka kugusia tu kwamba uchumi wetu wa nchi yetu ya Kenya. Katika uchumi wetu hivi sasa tunaona ya kwamba kuna afueni kidogo, lakini haijatosha. Afueni kidogo imeingia ya kwamba vitu kidogo kama unga kidogo pengine umerudi chini kidogo, mboga kidogo zinaweza kupatikana, lakini mambo mengi bado ya kuweza kuchukua mkono na kuweka kwenye sahani na kuchukua chakula na kula bado ya kuna shida. Kila kitu bado kimekuwa bado ni kigumu, na ilikuwa muhimu sana angeweza kuangalia hilo jambo. Cha pili ni kwamba Bwana Spika, tuko na mambo ya medical insurance covers. Kuna SHA na hii tunasema ya kwamba ingekuwa pia rais aliweza kufafanua vizuri jambo hili. Hatuioni hizo insurance zote mbili zikiwa zinafanya kazi kamilifu. Wengi wamekwenda katika mahospitali na wengi wameweza kuambiwa hii siwezi kukubaliana nayo. Mimi mwenyewe niko na daktari wangu, nilienda kumuona na akaniambia bwana, nikamwambia bwana, sioni watu hapa wakitumia zile kadi zao za SHI na SHA. Akasema hizo bwana hatukubaliani nazo. Ikiwa madaktari wenyewe wale professionals hawawezi kukubaliana na hiyo inamaanisha kwamba bado kuna shida. Bado kuna shida. Rais anaweza kuwa na nia nzuri ya kuona ya kwamba wale watu kila mtu amepata huduma za kuweza kujifaidisha kiafya. Lakini katika ikifika saa implementation wengi wanambwaga rais. Kwa hiyo inaweza kuwa hata si makosa yake. Yeye anafikiria kwamba watu wanafanya, lakini watu wengine bado wanamchelewesha katika zile tegemeo lake alilofema kwamba atasaidia wa Kenya. Lakini tukiona hivi sasa hiyo medical cover ya SHI na SHA zote mbili ziko na shida ama hazifanyi kazi vile vinavyotakana kutekelezwa. Bwana Spika, nataka kusema pia vile mawaziri wake anaosema rais ni lazima atimize. Lakini mara nyingi tunaona jambo la kusikitisha, ikiwa mahali ambapo rais atakuwa anaweza kuongea kitu alafu jambo hilo lisiwe, wale wanaendelea kumbwaga rais. Ikiwa rais mwenyewe anasema kitu kama CBA, ile tunaita collective bargaining agreement, ni ya nini waziri wako wewe wa elimu atie kidole? Ama ni wa nini wewe waziri wako wa afya atie kidole katika CBA ya kwamba tutatekeleza mshahara kama huu ifikapo baada ya miaka 2 ama baada ya mwaka 1, na alafu asitekeleze? Na hapo ndio kunaanza mambo ya migomo. Kwa hiyo tunasema ya kwamba ingekuwa bora rais aweze kuambia wale watu wake ya kwamba kutoka hivi sasa sitataka waziri wangu aweze kusign CBA ya wafanyikazi ilhali hakuona hali ya uchumi, ama ilhali hakuona kama serikali inaweza kutimiza wajibu wake wa kukamilisha lile deni la wale walimu ama watekelezaji kazi katika pande zote zinazotakana, kama pande za afya, pande za elimu, pande za mambo mengine. La mwisho Bwana Rais, la mwisho kuweza kumweleza katika rais katika ile hotuba yake aliyokuwa akisema, aliongea vizuri sana kulinganishana na
give the minority leader another 3 more minutes to conclude.
Give me 5, another 5.
3 minutes, leader. I will consider that request once the 3 minutes is over. But
I want to touch on important aspects, Bwana Speaker. Kitu kwanza Bwana Speaker aliweza kugusia mambo mengi mazuri. Akasema habari ya sukari, akasema habari ya mahindi, akasema habari ya kahawa, akasema habari ya chai, kimaendeleo kwamba inaweza kusaidia namna gani. Lakini tukiangalia zaidi yale mimea aliyogusia, kuna mmea muhimu sana ama mimea miwili muhimu sana kule maeneo ninayotoka mimi. Kama upande wa Kilifi kuna kuzwa korosho na mkorosho ni kitu muhimu sana kwa maisha ya wafanyaji ya wakulima kule, na mananasi. Vitu vingi sana vinaweza kupatikana na kwa urahisi, manake ile ardhi ni ile ardhi ambayo inatengeneza inaweza kukuza mimea kama mkorosho na mnanasi na kama maembe vile. Ingekuwa vyema kama rais angekuwa aligusia pia kwamba serikali imechukua hatua gani kutenga kiasi cha pesa ambazo zinaweza kuwekewa kwa wale wakulima wanaolima ama wanaopanda mikorosho, wanaouza korosho, ama wale wanaouza mananasi, wanaouza maembe, manake hao pia ni wanabiashara kule. Hivi sasa tunajikuta katika hali ya mchochole. Ukiona Kilifi ni mahali ambapo kulikuwa kunaendelea sana, lakini utaona ya kwamba Kilifi hivi sasa mambo ya mkorosho, watu wengi hakuna kazi, vijana wameketi tu, watu wanaishia kula mgukaa na vitendo vibaya kuvitenda. Lakini mimi ningesema tu ya kwamba ingekuwa vyema pia katika hotuba yake ya rais, na pale alipo akiwa atapanga chochote hivi sasa, aangalie na aone ya kwamba mkorosho ndani ya Kilifi unaweza kusaidia watu wengi kwa kupata mapato ya kazi. Mwisho, nilikuwa nataka kumpatia pongole rais kwa sababu ya mambo ya Adani ni mtu ambaye pengine angezorotesha nchi yetu katika hali ya uchumi, lakini aliona mbele, akaona ni bora ya kwamba niwaambie wa Kenya hii pengine njia hii haifai. Na zaidi sana tuliona Trump mwenyewe alikataa hizo deal za Adani. Hata Amerika wakasema ya kwamba lazima ashikwe, na hatimaye mwisho hakumaliza hata siku 24. Sio kama sisi tukiambiwa mtu fulani ashikwe anaweza potea kwa wiki nzima ashikwe. Lakini kule aliposema ashikwe, Adani alishikwa mara moja chini ya kama masaa 24. Kwa hiyo tunasema hatua aliyochukua ilikuwa safi, na hatua aliyoagiza rais ya kwamba KETRACO waweze kusimama, wasiendeshe ile biashara yao, na vile vile upande wa yeye Adani kupewa kazi nyingine atengeneze ya kama ni airport yetu. Bwana Spika, mimi nataka kupatia kongole kwa sababu ni jambo ambalo litasaidia uchumi wa nchi hii kutoweza kupoteza pesa ambazo hizo pesa hizo tunazihitaji zaidi, na ziweze kuchungwa ili zifanywe ufisadi. Asante Bwana Spika.
You note, Leader, that you are unable to fully utilize the 3 minutes I gave you, and appreciate the timekeeping so that the rest of the colleagues who are interested in contributing can also get an opportunity. I now call upon Senator James Kamau Murango.
Asante sana Mr. Speaker. Kwanza ningetaka ni mwalifu Senator Mazoya kwamba nataka tu
Senator Murango,
naongea tu nazungumza tu niseme kwamba
necessarily informing he's already out of the microphone.
Kwa hivyo nadhani Mr. Speaker, asante sana. Basi nitataja tu niseme ya kwamba kuna mswada muhimu sana ambao tumekuwa tukizunguka kama kamati ya ukulima katika Seneti, na tushaenda Kwale, tukaenda pia mpaka Lamu, na nadhani tutakapomaliza na ule mswada itakuwa ni rahisi sana kuhakikisha kwamba korosho, makandamia, ufuta na vitu kama hizo pia nazi zinatiliwa maanani, kwa sababu sheria ambayo iko kwa sasa inafaa kuwa kufuatiliwa, na najua wakati itakuja katika bunge la Seneti tutapata kuungwa mkono. Mr. Speaker, kwanza nikitaka niongee mambo mawili matatu. Kwanza ni kwamba katiba yetu inaruhusu kwamba rais kuja kutoa taarifa katika bunge la kitaifa na la Seneti, na ni vizuri anakuja anaelezea mambo inayoendelea, yawe mazuri ama mabaya. Nimpe kongole kwa sababu Swahili husema murina haogopi nyuki. Kwa hivyo mambo yawe mazuri ama mabaya lazima yasemwe ili Wakenya waweze kujua. Mr. Speaker, nitaongea kidogo kuhusu kilimo, na nitakuwa nikalili wa akili kama sitasema kwamba mbolea ya ruzuku ambayo serikali imekuwa ikipeana imesaidia pakubwa wakulima. Na mwanzo ilianzia vizuri, imeendelea, lakini zile taasisi na nyenzo za serikali ambazo zinafanya kazi katika Wizara ya Ukulima lazima atie bidii na sana sana waweze kuangalia kwamba kile kilimo ambazo kinafanyika, kwa sababu chakula kingi ambao kinacharishwa inafanywa kwa misimu. Mstahiki Spika, kama leo nimepokea simu fifi, kwa kimombo missed call hapa kutoka kwa wakulima kutoka eneo la Mwea, ambao wanasema ni kweli mbolea iko, mbolea kupanda iko, na mbolea ambayo inayowekwa wakati mimea inaendelea kukua bado iko. Lakini zile sheria ziko pale ni kwamba saa hii wanavuna, wanachukua mbolea kupanda. Wanaambiwa mikakati yenye iko, lazima kwanza wachukue mbolea ambayo inawekwa mmea ukiwa unaendelea kukua, na lazima wachukue hiyo mbolea kwa sababu hawajafungua ile mbolea ambayo inawekwa mchele wakati unapandwa. Mstahiki Spika, unajua madini ambayo inatakikana na mmea wakati unapandwa ni tofauti na ile ambayo inatumika wakati mmea ni mkubwa. Kwa hivyo ningeuliza Wizara ya Ukulima iweze kufungua, kwa sababu mbolea ishanunuliwa, mbolea iko pale, iweze kupewa mkulima, kwa sababu ikiwekwa pale itakuwa haina maana. Mstahiki Spika, unajua changirizi ya chungu huwa hata ndovu. Shida tulizo nazo ndogo ndogo zile za mkulima ambaye amecheleweshwa kupewa mbolea ambayo serikali ishanunua na kupeleka mahali pale, ndio inasababisha kwamba yule mkulima kwa kujiandaa na kutoa chakula ambayo inatosha anarudi nyuma. Na kwa hivyo kama wale ambao wako katika taasisi ya NCPB kama wangeweza kurainisha ili wakulima wapate voucher na mtu apewe mbolea ambayo mifuko ambayo wanahitaji, itakuwa ni vizuri zaidi. Kwa sababu unapoenda pale unapata yule mtu ambaye anataka kulima, anataka mifuko 10, ananyimwa, anapewa mfuko moja, lakini mbolea bado iko pale. Wale wanaofika mapema waweze kupewa mbolea ili waende wakalime. Mstahiki Spika, nitaguzia pia kuuliwa kwa wanawake, kwa sababu imezidi sana. Na si jambo la kawaida, kwa sababu kawaida mwanaume venye ameumbwa kwamba si wa kupiga ama kuumiza wanawake. Na rais amesema kwamba yeye mwenyewe hataruhusu mambo hiyo kuendelea. Sasa kuna Wizara ya Usalama, kuna DCI, kuna polisi. Kazi kwao ili waweze kutafuta wale wanaume ambao wanafanya mambo ambayo hayafai. Mstahiki Spika, tunapoendelea hivi kuna siku 16 za wanaharakati kuhakikisha kwamba mauaji ya wanawake imepungua ama imemalizwa kabisa. Lakini wakati ambao unaotumiwa wakati mwanamke anapoumizwa na kushikwa, nadhani bado tunafaa tuangalie zaidi na tuweze pia kuhakikisha kwamba wanaopelekwa wanafungwa kabisa, kuhakikisha kwamba wale ambao wanatambia kama hizo hawata kuja kuzifanya. Mstahiki Spika, ukulima ni jambo la maana sana, na ukweli ni kwamba bei ya kahawa inaendelea kupanda. Leo nilikuwa naangalia pia bei ya kahawa katika soko la kimataifa, na ni kweli imeendelea kupanda. Pia kuna pesa inayopeanwa wakulima ambayo inaitwa cherry fund, na kuna pesa ingine ambayo iko commodities fund, ambayo hiyo pesa iko na imewekwa na serikali. Lakini KPC inafaa ifanye njia ya kupata ile fedha iwe rahisi ya mkulima wa kawaida, nyanya anayelima kahawa, isiwe ni ngumu, isiwe ni jambo msalangambo ya mtu yeyote ambaye anataka kuchukua zile fedha, ili waweze kuchukua na wingi na tuongeze ukulima wa kahawa, kwa vile kuweza kununua miche na kupeana, kwa sababu najua kwamba ukulima pia umekatuliwa. Juzi nilikuwa naangalia katika runinga, nikaona senator wa Makueni, gavana wa Makueni akipeana miche ya kahawa na kusema kwamba anajaribu kuhakikisha kwamba mazao ya kahawa imeongezeka katika katuzi la Makueni. Na mimi ningeuliza magavana katika ukulima, kwa sababu ukulima umekatuliwa, pia waende wapambane wahakikisha kwamba wakulima wanapata miche aina tofauti, kama ni mikorosho ipeanwe, kama ni maparachichi ipeanwe, ili wakulima waweze kufaidika. Mstahiki Spika, afichaye mgonjwa hufichuliwa bila kilio. Na nimesikia wengi wakiongea, na mimi nitaongea juu mambo ya ndani ambayo serikali ishaona kwamba ndani si mtu ambaye anaweza kufanya kazi hapa, na ndani hivyo ndo inavyofaa. Kwa sababu Mstahiki Spika, jambo likionekana likiongelewa sana wakati limeongelewa na rais, nadhani watu wanaichukulia kwa uzito. Nadhani hiyo ni jambo zuri kwamba akae kando, ili kama kuna njia nyingine yote bandala ya kuhakikisha kwamba viwanja vyetu vimejengwa, kama ni mambo ya kusambaza stima imefanywa, iweze kufanyika na mtu ambaye tunajua ni msafi, ambaye atatuletea hasara. Mstahiki Spika, mambo ya elimu. Pale ninapotoka Kirinyaga kuna shule inaitwa Muslim School pale Sagana. Kwa muda mrefu sana imefikisha hadhi ya kupewa junior secondary, ambayo mpaka kwa sasa hivi wamekuwa kilia. Nilikuwa nimetuma barua hata kwa waziri, na kwa sababu mambo ambayo inasemwa wenye kwenda pale kufanya kazi ya mkono ni wao mawaziri na wale makatimbu katika zile wizara. Pia ni vizuri waangalie na kuhakikisha kwamba zile shule zinahitaji kupandishwa hadhi, zipandishwe ili watoto wasije wanaenda kwenda safari ndefu sana kwenda kutafuta elimu. Nikimalizia, Mstahiki Spika, nitasema kwamba mimi kama mwenyekiti wa kamati ya ukulima katika kamati ya Seneti, mkulima ni mtu wa maana sana. Tunahitaji mkulima asubuhi, tunapotafuta staftahi ya asubuhi. Saa 4 wakati tunapokunywa chai ambayo iko na maziwa na majani pia. Saa 7 katika chakula cha mchana na chakula cha jioni. Tunamhitaji mkulima zaidi ya mara 5 kwa siku, kushinda mtu yeyote yule mwingine. Na kwa hivyo kufuatilia ile bidii imewekwa kuhakikisha kwamba mkulima anafaidika. Tuendelee kuwasikiza wakulima. Ni kweli walituchagua, na unajua chemichemi si mtemi, ukitaka maji mpaka uiname. Hiyo ni kusema hata wakulima anakaa wandogo ni wandosi wetu. Tuwasikize, na tumeendelea kuwasikiza kuhakikisha kwamba wamepata kila kitu wanaohitaji ili tuweze kuzalisha chakula kutosha katika nchi na waendelee kuimarika. Asante sana Mstahiki Spika.
Senator Beth Shengo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity also to speak to the President's speech on the state of the nation. First of all, I want to really thank the President and appreciate him for the speech that came, and for the first time that I heard the President speak to my heart. Mr. Speaker, I would touch on a few areas which the President's speech touched on. One is to thank the President for assuring Kenyans that Kenyan shilling has stabilized, and that is the truth, against the dollar. Mr. Speaker, this encourages Kenyans who are also in diaspora, because we know they contribute a lot to building the economy of this nation. So with the shilling stabilized against the dollar, it is a plus for us in this country. I also want to thank the President on the measures taken on the food security. In the President's speech, he spoke on the measures that have been taken to ensure that we have food security in this nation. When people are starving, it's women and children who suffer most. And for me, as the women president of ODM / broad-based, I'm so encouraged to know that the President has people at heart, and he is thinking of how this country is going to be food secure. On CBC, the education system, Mr. Speaker, I've seen and heard some people casting some doubts. But the way CBC is taking place and how it was explained in the speech, it is taking shape. We have grade 7, grade 8, grade 9 that are in junior secondary school, and that is the JSS. And Mr. Speaker, they are adding to senior secondary, and our children are going to be prepared with the skills that to enable them to face this life and earn a living. I would say we only need extra steps to be taken to take this education system in the right direction. And as CBC takes shape and effect, our education system will improve. Mr. Speaker, as some of us have already alluded, it is true. The government has hired more than 56,000 teachers. And because it is a process, more are waiting to be hired. But I would only request that as teachers are hired, they consider those who completed their colleges or their universities earlier, so that they don't wait for so long before employment. Let's give them chance as we look forward for employing more teachers. Mr. Speaker, on the healthcare system, the President spoke about SHA and SHIV, but one thing excited my heart is that he gave direction on TAIVA care. Talking of the achievements and things that the government has done, I felt and sensed frustration from the President. The team that is working with him, the ministers, the permanent secretaries, and the entire team within the executive. Mr. Speaker, for me, I sensed some frustration because the team is not giving enough attention to the direction that the President is taking. They need to be more committed. They need to understand their mandate clearly so that the President is helped to deliver to Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, if the direction the country is taking is achieved, Kenya might be a nation where others will come to benchmark. On the women leadership, Mr. Speaker, I want to appreciate the President. He spoke clearly on how women leaders are not lesser leaders and they are not lesser human beings. I was excited then, but I have a question. Because we know Kenya as a country, we have been struggling with the actualization of 2/3 gender rule. I would only plead with the President as the head of this nation that he takes decisive steps to ensure that 2/3 gender rule is actualized. It is our constitutional right for women to lead in this nation. It is a constitutional right for even the National Assembly, as we speak, is not constitutionally constituted because we have a gender, women gender is not correctly represented. I plead with the President, Mr. President, sir, would you take decisive measures? I remember during your campaign time, you even spoke and signed a women charter. What went wrong where? Let this be actualized. And then we'll have women in leadership. No gender should take more than 2/3 in leadership. Mr. Speaker, allow me to say that from the President's speech, as we wait for 2027, I would urge more women to come out and contest for leadership positions. And I would ask our men, our women, to elect women in elective positions so that we may not even be pleading for the 2/3, but women will be elected through the ballot and they will take the positions. Mr. Speaker, I want also to comment on the femicide. It is so disheartening to see our Kenyans rising against each other and killing one another. I would request the institutions that are charged with the responsibility to ensure that if a crime is committed, actions are taken, immediate action is taken, those who are found to be criminals are punished, and the law takes its course against those who are killing women. It is so bad for people who are supposed to live in love, then they are the ones rising against each other. A husband killing the wife, or maybe a boyfriend killing the girlfriend. We need those who are charged with responsibilities, the police, the DCI, and every other institution that is charged with the responsibility to help curb this crime of femicide. Mr. Speaker, on corruption, I keenly listened to the president because this has been kind of a cancer in this nation. And it is my belief that the president is committed to handle corruption. May I speak to Kenyans that please, we put our country first, we cease from corrupt things, and we make sure that we follow the law. And every Kenyan deserves the best service in this nation. Mr. Speaker, I would say the president cares about these Kenyans and about this country. And that's why he listened to the cry of Kenyans and stopped their done deal that was coming to this nation. Kenyans had cried, others had said that Adani is okay and he can continue. But the president confirmed that he cares for this country, and that's why he stopped Adani deal. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as I finish, as I conclude on this, I would request that all of us as leaders in this nation, we join hands to build this nation, not considering where we come from, which language we speak, which ethnic group we belong, and we stand as Kenyans, defend this country, and make sure we build this country. We have a responsibility to leave a united country for our children and our children's children. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. As the President continues leading this country,
Senator Shango, your time is up. Senator Shango.
If only you give me half a minute just to make...
Give her half a minute just to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much. I was saying, as the President is now uniting the country and moving forward, Baba Raila Odinga will be elected when he becomes the chair of African Union. And this nation is on the right track. African continent will become great. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Siango. Lastly, Senator Danson Mugatana.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I take this opportunity to laud His Excellency the President for a very good State of the Nation address, the SONA, as is well known. Mr. Speaker, on page 81, after he had finished addressing the nation, His Excellency the President submitted 3 reports. One report on the progress of fulfilling international obligations of the Republic is submitted to the National Assembly, but the other 2 reports on measures taken and progress achieved in the realization of national values is submitted to the Senate, and the second report on the state of security is submitted to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, it is my interest to debate the report on the state of security. Mr. Speaker, the President captured a very critical issue that is nationwide. He discussed in this report, when I read it, about the national challenges, the regional challenges, and the international challenges that this country faces. And he gave what measures he needed to deal with and what his government and his administration, which we strongly support, is taking action on those various 3 fronts that are bringing challenges to the Republic of this country, of this nation. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about the national security challenges, the President in that report
explained that there were skirmishes on mineral prospects in Marsabit County, and he also mentioned that there were problems between Kitui and Tana River counties, and he went on to mention about border disputes involving Kisumu and Kericho counties, Taita Taveta and Makueni counties, and he discussed what those challenges were at the national level. And he said that he had issued a moratorium on the gold mines in Marsabit area. But then he also said that his government, as far as dealing with the border problems were concerned, he was going to do some of these measures which he said he will implement. The first one is creating peace building and conflict resolution programs. Now, Mr. Speaker, where Tana River County is concerned, and especially the border skirmishes that happened between Kitui County and Tana River County, Mr. Speaker, I allowed the President that in his plan from this report, peace-building missions and peace-building initiatives and programs were going to be invested in by this government. Mr. Speaker, we need those programs like yesterday. Our people, especially between Kitui and Tana River borders, where there's been a lot of tension, they need these programs to roll out like yesterday. I would have been very happy if the President would have also said that he is allocating this amount of money through this agency to go on these peace programs. Why? Because, Mr. Speaker, when you go on both sides of the divide on these borders, it's the same people who are living. And these are what we call resource-based conflicts. It's the same people who are living. In fact, you wonder why people are fighting. But people are fighting, and actual dislike has a reason. And some people have even translated that to community hatred. Mr. Speaker, these peace-building efforts must start today. I'm mentioning them specifically because he stated in that report that that is number one thing he was going to do. We have the National Cohesion Body. That commission, Mr. Speaker, needs to be empowered to carry out these missions. Mr. Speaker, we need to have peace champions along those border areas. In Tana River County, Mr. Speaker, on one side, we are facing problems with Kitui. On the other side, we are facing problems with Garissa County. On this downside, it is with Kilifi County. Because our county is so vast, people tend to think all the land is in Tana River. Our only good neighbors who have never shown interest in grabbing our land is Tharaka Nithi and Lamu County. But our other neighbors have consistently shown an interest in trying to come for land from Tana River. And this, Mr. Speaker, should stop. Mr. Speaker, the President said in that report that he, on Roman 2, that he will conduct an all-inclusive adjudication and delimitation.
Senator Mungatana.
Yes.
Would you like to be informed by Senator Siango?
I wish my time would stop. If that time can be stopped, then I
Senator
don't mind
Siango,
the information.
I will grant you an extension of your time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to inform my good neighbor and my chair that Tana River borders Kitui County. But Kitui County people have never expressed any interest to grab land from Tana River. Actually, it's Tana River people who are aggressively advancing towards Kitui County. Kitui County people are very peaceful. They keep to their lane. They live in their land. They have never wished to grab any land from Tana River. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Danson Mugatana, proceed.
I don't think that information, Mr. Speaker, that information may not be useful for purposes of this debate. That is just a point of view, because the boundaries, we know that we've had an issue. They have their view, we have our view. But what I'm saying is that we need peace-building efforts, and we support what the President has rolled out, but he needs to go beyond these good statements and make sure that the national cohesion, which is the agency that is seized of this, to be funded appropriately, so that the problems along Kitui Tana River, the problems along Garissa Tana River, the problems along Kilifi Tana River can be resolved as he promised. Mr. Speaker, the President in this report on the state of security also said that it is the program of the government that they will conduct an all-inclusive adjudication and delimitation of disputed boundaries to avert escalation of conflict. And Mr. Speaker, this is written in black and white, that the government will conduct an all-inclusive adjudication and delimitation of disputed boundaries. Now, Mr. Speaker, this is such a heavy statement, and he has already set out all the boundaries that I've mentioned. And there are many counties which have been affected by this conflict. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that hasn't been mentioned is...
Senator Mugatana,
yes,
we are adding you the 1 minute I committed to for your conclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only thing the President has not mentioned, Mr. Speaker, is where is the funding going to be found in this budget? For example, we know that he's going to present a supplementary budget before the National Assembly. I wish, Mr. Speaker, that the money for carrying out this all-inclusive boundary delimitation can be actually found. This should be treated as a very serious national issue. If it is contained in this report, it will be so sad, Mr. Speaker, if next year, a time like this, after the State of the Nation address, I will be sitting here to debate that this was there last year. Because no money was allocated, nothing happened. So, I want to urge His Excellency the President and those who are sitting listening to us as we are debating this matter, that the question of boundaries is a very critical issue, and we need to find resources within these areas so that money can be allocated for boundaries. These disputes need to be resolved. Why?
Senator Mugatana, your time is up. Honorable members, there being no other member keen on making contribution, I call upon the majority leader to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to appreciate our colleagues who have taken time to speak to this motion and share their key highlights. That's the beauty of the mosaic called the Kenyan democracy. There are those who will see the good in what this administration is doing. There are those who see nothing good at all, and that's part of our democracy, Mr. Speaker. We must divide and celebrate it as it is. But as we have been reminded many times, Mr. Speaker, there are certain facts that there is nothing you can do about. There are things that you can debate. Mr. Speaker, anybody trying to argue that there has not been success in the agriculture sector, yet for the very first time, Mr. Speaker, we are not importing common food items that we used to import in so many tons, from maize to sugar, Mr. Speaker, that there has been a deliberate effort, Mr. Speaker, to subsidize production as opposed to subsidizing consumption, which was the case in the previous administration, Mr. Speaker, is lying to themselves. The beauty is that the citizens and the ordinary voters in the village can distinguish, and they know what is working and what is not working. The fact that this administration has avoided a sovereign default, Mr. Speaker, is something worth mentioning that hasn't been celebrated enough times, Mr. Speaker, because if it was not for the prudent leadership of the President, Mr. Speaker, chances are we might as well have defaulted as a country and faced very grave consequences, far more grave, Mr. Speaker, than the noise we hear and the statements sometimes which are generated out of ignorance by people either sometimes online from I don't know which parts of the country, Mr. Speaker, where people maybe out of the abundance of ignorance or total disconnect with the realities and the threats that are posed to this country by decisions that have been made in over the years, Mr. Speaker. So we must appreciate what has been done and take time to listen also to that which can be improved later. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to appreciate those that have spoken to this and celebrate the beauty of our democracy, Mr. Speaker, that has been so ably shown by members this afternoon. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and beg to reply. Mr. Speaker, in accordance to Standing Order number 66.3, I wish to request that we defer the putting of a question until such a time as we may have sufficient quorum to take this motion to a vote. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Majority Leader. Pursuant to Standing Order 66, putting of the question as regards this motion is deferred to the next sitting of the House. I saw direct. Clerk, you may now call the next order. All right, honorable members, we now go back to order number 5. Clerk, you may call order number 5 under papers.
Order number 5, papers.
Senator Faki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, the 26th of November, 2024. The report of the Mediation Committee on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill 2024, National Assembly Bills number 38 of 2024, on behalf of the co-chair of the Mediation Committee. Thank you.
Order number 6, and notices of motion.
Speaker, sir, on behalf of the co-chair of the Mediation Committee, Senator Roba, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that the Senate adopts the report of the Mediation Committee on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 38 of 2024, laid on the table of the Senate today, the 26th of November, 2024, and that pursuant to Article 113, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution, and Standing Order number 167.3 of the Senate Standing Orders, approves the mediated version of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Clerk, you proceed to call the next order.
Order number 10, the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, second reading, resumption of debate.
This motion is deferred to the next session of the House, sitting of the House, sorry. Call the next order.
Order number 11, motion, consideration of the National Assembly amendments to the Cotton Industry Development Bill, Senate Bills number 5 of 2023.
Equally, in the absence of the chairperson, Standing Committee on Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, this motion is deferred to the next sitting of the House. Call the next order.
Order number 12, motion, consolidation of bursary funds for equitable access to education in Kenya.
This is equally a motion that will be deferred in the absence of the mover, as well as members whose term was interrupted in the last session. All right, members, you may rise. Honorable Senators, there being no other business on the order paper, the Senate stands adjourned until Wednesday, 27th of November, 2024 at 9:30 a.m.